Good evening and welcome to the July 9, 2008 Civil Service Commission meeting. May we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Here.
Commissioner Coleman?
Here.
Commissioner Gantis?
Here.
Commissioner Abkarian?
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Manukian is absent.
Next item, please.
Reading of the minutes.
Move to approve as and dispense with reading.
Any second?
Second.
There's a motion and second. Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Abkarian?
Yes. Next item, please.
Oral communications.
Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. Commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The one card I have here is from Dr. Espiritu. Say it right?
Yes.
This time I said it right? Espiritu.
Very good. Good evening, Mr. Commissioner, Mr. Chairman, staff. I am Dr. Richard Espiritu. On today's agenda, there's several items that are going to be discussed. One is the police department, one is the fire department. I'd like to tell you an incident that occurred about 5 years ago. 5 of my son's friends applied for the Glendale Police Department, and for some strange reason, all 5 were turned down. The interesting thing is one became a California Highway Patrol officer. The other one is a firearms and tactics instructor for the Secret Service now. One was considered, he passed the physical exam, but was considered physically unfit to become a member of the Glendale Police Department, but now he's serving as a Navy SEAL in the Middle East. 1 year of hell. The other individual was said that they didn't feel that he was capable of waiting for a 5-minute backup if he became a police officer. Right now he's a U.S. Sky Marshal. Wonder how long it takes for backup when you're on your way to Indonesia from Hawaii. This one I like to talk about is the cream coming to the top of the bottle. There are 14,000 Border Patrol agents. There are 450 special response teams that are certified, and there are 37 snipers. One of those 37 is my son. He is qualified in sidearms, UMP 40, shotgun, M16, and a sniper rifle. He, on his supervisory test, he just scored a 96. He was classified as being too immature. I don't know why, but that's beside the point. We're not concerned about making any lateral transfers because everybody is happy where they are. But I like to talk about schoolyard bullies. The Mental Health Association of America has published an article about schoolyard bullies, and they equate that to workplace bullies. And you can go online, look it up. It's a very interesting article because they talk about coercion and intimidation. There was a captain with the Glendale Police Department. His name is Captain Mark DiStanzo. He published a report. This is a report regarding the need of correcting the homeless problem here in the city of Glendale. His solution, and what he calls it is the final solution, is to throw them all in jail and escort them out of town. I don't know if that's exactly legal, but that's what he put in his report. I also came up with a number of, through the California Public Information Request, a number of different claims filed against the city for discrimination. Same name comes up, Mr. DiStanzo, time and time again.
DiStanzo.
The interesting thing is that EEOC and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 says the city's supposed to protect people against this type of stuff. One of the things that interestingly happened is one of the individuals who's a frequent visitor of the Glendale City Council and has spoken out about the fire department numerous times. His son has gone to the fire department scout program, and he intends to become a fireman. He was told by a fire captain who was active with the Glendale Fire Department, if your father doesn't shut up, you'll never get into the fire department. Now, I'm not going to mention names because this individual is still active with the fire department. The captain I've mentioned previously is no longer with the police department, so I don't have any problems. But I think we need to take a very serious look at intimidation within the various city departments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. By the way, Dr. Sperto, Captain DeSasso is no longer with the police department, just so you would know. Okay, thank you. That's the only document I have. What's next?
Recruitment and examination status report.
Oh, I'm sorry. There is a statement.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move item number 10 up to item number 4.
Okay,
Reports
do we need to take a motion and take it out of second?
Second.
Motion and second. Can we get roll call on that, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Sheriff Carrion?
Yes. Okay, item number 10.
Reports and information past due employee performance evaluations.
Mr. Doyle?
Mr. Chair, you have your monthly report on past due employment performance evaluations. We have, again, many departments that have no past dues. There are some that have first and second notices, and we do, for the first time in several months, have 2 departments with third notices. The department heads, or representative thereof, are here. One would be library, the other would be finance. I will note that library, our newly appointed director, is engaged in a deposition of which she was unable to get out of. It took longer than she was expecting. I assure you she would have been here had this not been the case. A representative library administrator, Carolyn Fleming, is here in her place if that's sufficient for the commission. We also have Mr. Bob Elliott, who is finance director, here this evening.
Okay. The commissioner want to hear from those 2 directors?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's get the finance director first. Say your name, sir.
Hi, Bob Elliott, Finance Department. All of 12 days now. Pleasure to be here.
And in 12 days, you weren't able to do 2...
One way or another, no.
Well, welcome. Nice to have you,
Thank you.
Here. Thank you for showing up. Not the type of welcome we wanted to give to you, unfortunately, it appears.
Truly.
But the custom of this practice of this commission is to actually bring the department heads here if you had a third notice, meaning going back to March of 2008, and you've had 2 of those, and that's the reason that you're here, and we kind of ask for an explanation. I think it's pretty obvious with you, but...
I don't have any excuses. The only explanation I can offer is Mr. Allers was... I talked with him before he went on vacation this week, otherwise he would have been here. He offered no excuses other than apologies that he was very busy with the budget and doing double duty throughout that time. So he assured me he will have that done quickly.
Okay. Hopefully before the next
You bet.
report.
I'm not coming back here.
I don't know that hopefully is the operative word here,
Yeah.
Mr. Elliott. I think it will be done.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Anyone? Oh, welcome.
Thank you very much.
I have a statement.
Yes.
Just, Mr. Elliott, just in case you might have a doubt in your mind that we take these performance evaluations seriously, let there be no doubt in your mind. We as you may know, the Civil Service Commission is, I understand you came from Burbank, so you're familiar with the Burbank Civil Service Commission. And it's similar.
I hear their commissioners are not that great, actually.
They're not as good as our commissioners.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Doyle. Just joking, just joking. I just...
Rough audience today. But in conducting hearings that we do in disciplinary hearings, and we do a fair number of them, every hearing has as exhibits past due employee evaluations. And if they're late, they might impact a particular time something is done. And I can tell you some hearings that I've done, and I know Mr. Abkarian, we're the two senior members of this, although I am the senior member of this commission. We have found them to be, when they're late, that becomes an issue.
Sure.
So this is why we're on this like very hard. And I think I wanted to impress that upon you.
Hopefully we won't even have second notices.
Actually, I think it's kind of a very different, probably 180 degrees different from what Burbank did. There was no emphasis on getting employee evaluations. I mean, they were done fairly timely, but oftentimes slipped, and there wasn't really any push to get it done, and this is probably a good thing. So.
Okay, thank you so much.
We'll find out how good you think it is.
Any other comments? Oh, thank you very much. Welcome. And then we have someone from the library. Fleming. Your name, please?
My name is Carolyn Fleming, and I'm a library administrator. Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I apologize. Cindy Cleary fully intended to be here. She was kept away by circumstances well beyond her control. And a half an hour ago, I was called in. I apologize for my appearance. I have spent the day loading books or unloading books from a 25-foot truck in preparation for our new library. So my apologies on that behalf. I would never come this way. As Mr. Elliott said, we also have no excuses and very much the same explanation. Ms. Cleary is the brand new director of the library, and just about the time that the performance evaluation was due, we lost our director and ended up with double work on the upper level management for whom the performance evaluation was due or was to be written, and the budget that we were to be putting together as well. So no excuses, just an explanation and an apology. It will not happen again.
Okay. Any comments?
This is the only comment I have. Mr. Elliott, I understand he's from another city, but Cindy's been here quite a while, so that's a little less of an excuse. But I happen to know Cindy. We all do. She's been here a while. She's very good, very capable. I'm very excited about her appointment. But I think similarly, we would hope at the next report we're not seeing any of this stuff.
Definitely take the message back.
Mr. Coleman.
Just overall, there's, in looking at the Administrative Services report, there's a lot of departments with first notices. There's a total of 9 second notices and a total of 3 third notices. And I think I'm going on my 6th year on this commission as we speak, and this is one of the lousiest reports I've seen in 3 or 4 years. And I'm not singling out library or finance. And I understand, and that's why I kind of boo-hooed it last meeting when I saw the second notices. I knew there was, new people coming in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I fully was not expecting to see third notices. And that's why we instituted this policy of bringing the department heads to the meetings if there are. My whole chitch about late performance evaluations is that it has such a negative impact on the employee. How am I doing? I was supposed to get an evaluation last March. Didn't happen. And I think it has an adverse effect on the morale of the employees within the department.
I agree.
Thank you.
And we will definitely try to avoid any further occurrence.
Okie doke.
Well, thank you for coming in. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
unloading all those books.
And we invite you all. You will be getting an invitation July 26th is our grand opening.
Well,
Which one is
congratulations.
that, the Adams Hill?
This is the Adams Square.
All
Yes.
right, exciting.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming down. Any other comments? Okay, what's next?
Recruitment and examination status report.
Mr. Chair, this item before you is our recruitment and examination status report. It shows the current workload of recruitments in all various phases assigned by each member of my staff. Once again, a lot of activity, a lot of exams. If you have any questions, be happy to try and answer them.
Any questions? You know, this always just gets me. And you know, we shouldn't look at numbers because I think that but I mean, I look at Mr. Nersessian and Miss Martin or Juan, and I just, I'm not looking at how many lines there are here, but there's like 30 compared to 4. What is you mentioned that the other analysts have other things that they do. Could you tell me, like, what? Because I want to look at Mr. Nersessian. I'm looking at this saying, well, my God, he's going to ask for a huge raise or something next month. We're not giving it to you, Mr. Nersessian, but...
And don't ask.
Could you tell me a little bit about what involves, let's say, what's the difference between what Mr. Nersessian does and what Amy does, for example?
Well, they're both at two different job levels. Miss Martin is a senior human resources analyst, and she essentially assists me in running the department. She's taken on a variety of administrative roles, and she's essentially my right hand. So she's not engaged as much any longer in the day-to-day recruitment activity as some of the other staff. Also, with Steve Nersessian, a couple of factors are at work here. You'll notice a lot of those are hourly recruitments with the Parks Department, and to some degree they are sort of a passive recruitment process where the bulletins are up and we gather a bunch of applications, and then at various points throughout the year we'll call people in to test them. But it's not like these are active recruitments where every day there's some type of work going on. Also with Mr. Nersessian is that he does the Water and Power Department recruitments, which is one of the few departments that generally isn't subject to any types of hiring freezes or slowdowns or budgetary problems. So we continue to get recruitments there. He does the recruitment end, and also you're familiar with Miss Klein, who actually works out of Water and Power. She handles most of the employee relations and the non-recruitment functions for that very large department. And this isn't the case of the other analysts. The other analysts deal with both recruitment, say at Miss Akopian, for example, she deals with recruitment issues for the Public Works Department, another huge department, but she also deals with employee relations issues and assisting in negotiations, investigations, things like that. So, we do make a lot of efforts to make sure the staff is balanced in their work assignments.
Thank you for that explanation. Sure. It makes it very clear. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Thank you. What's next?
Eligible list established.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, we have one list since our last meeting a few weeks ago. List established in the Police Department, Community Service Officer for Records. This was a promotional process. 11 people on the list. If you have any questions about that, be happy to answer them.
I have a question.
Yes. Yes.
I guess it really kind of goes into the next item, because our next item talks about new hiring for the same position. If we have 11 on the eligible list, there are more than 11 vacancies?
Yes, and that's a good question, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gantis. The function of police records has undergone a bit of a transition over the past few months. Used to be a classification called police records specialist. We had a group of employees in that particular job classification. We're in the process of transitioning them to the CSO job classification, which is a little bit higher pay, a little bit more responsibility, but a move that was made to really assist in our recruitment and retention of people in this particular occupation. It's a very, very hard job. It's a 24/7 job. A lot of people apply for it and don't realize that, gee, I might be assigned a night shift or a swing shift or something like that. And we felt it was more appropriate to make that into a community service officer job. So what we ended up having to do was, in order to transition our police records specialists to CSO, we actually put up a job bulletin and had these folks apply, and we did a very simple oral board, and that's what you see here. 11 individuals transitioned into that. There are actually, I believe, 3 or more openings still, which we're going to have to do through an open recruitment, which, again, is the next item. So.
Yes, sir.
Just a quick question for Mr. Braden before I proceed. Is there anything wrong with taking these 2 items? Can we discuss the specs or the job bulletin for the community service officers as well as this item in here on the eligibility list?
Well, no, you need to take them separately because
Okay.
the eligibility list is not an action item.
All right. Well, then I'll word it this way. And I
Go
don't.
back to it, though, if you want.
Well, is there somebody here from the police department that can tell me whether or not these of the 11 applications received and the total on the eligibility list also equaling 11, they go through the extensive background investigation?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, City staff, Kurt Waller, Captain with the Administrative Services Division. Yes, they do. Each one of those individual applicants would go through a full background, which really is the crux of many of the police department's hiring issues and the reasons you see these processes requiring so many applicants in order for us to get what would otherwise be a relatively small number of spots filled. So the answer to that question is yes.
So in other words, you had a total pool of 11 applicants, and had they previously gone through the background check, or was it something done while this list was being established?
For the promotional process, we had a total of 10 internal applicants and 1 external. Although the individual worked here in the city, she was not occupying a record specialist position. All 10 of the individuals have already passed a background examination, and so we will not be putting them back through that particular process. The 1 outside applicant, although, will have to go back through a background process.
But she's on the list.
She's on
regardless.
the list, and she is on the list, and I will say she's a veteran police department employee that had gone elsewhere, and we're very, very fortunate to have lured her back. So we feel like the job classification, to a certain extent, did exactly what we hoped in terms of bringing in additional talent, and we certainly hope by opening up an outside recruitment that we'll be able to fill these spots and then retain these individuals once we get them up and running and finally get that bureau fully staffed. So.
Thank you.
Anyone else? In reference to the item of eligible list established. Thank you, Captain. Okay, next item.
Job bulletin for approval, community services officer, police records.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, as previously discussed, this is a request for an open bulletin for community service officer for records. As we've already discussed, we just did a promotional exam, again, to transition internal candidates into this position. There remain, I believe, 3 openings at this for this classification, and thus we're seeking an open recruitment to fill those remaining openings. Again, we feel with the utilization of the community service officer classification, we'll do a lot better than we had in the past as far as attracting a good pool of candidates. And as Commissioner Coleman had alluded, those folks will be put through an examination process, most likely written, most likely typing, oral boards, as well as a background investigation. So with that, if you have any further questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Once again, Captain Palmer's here, Russ Kwan is here, and Ms. Unanian all had a part in it.
Any comments? Any motions?
Approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Chair Carrion.
Yes. Next item.
Report on allowing police officers to appeal transfers with loss of pay to the Commission.
Okay. Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, I'd like to have Ms. Marino from the Police Department, General Counsel, come up to present this item, essentially having to do with the more contemporary interpretation of the Public Safety Officer Bill of Rights and what we believe officers are entitled to in case of a transfer resulting in a loss of pay. So, Ms. Marino.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Commission and City staff. As indicated, Carmen Marino with the City Attorney's Office, General Counsel for the Police Department. Tonight we are asking the court of the Commission to consider a request, and our request is fairly simple, and we feel that it is supported in the law. We've identified a few cases that are mentioned in our in the memo that's been provided to the Commission. Essentially, the request is when a police officer is transferred for performance or disciplinary purposes, reasons, that they'd be afforded the opportunity to come before the Commission and appeal that action. The cases that are outlined in the memo support this proposal, and we think it would be appropriate for the Commission to allow that opportunity in situations involving public safety officers. So this is limited to public safety officers.
Any discussion?
Where the action involves a reduction in pay. So that's
I have a
key
question about that, but let me see if anyone else has any questions.
So, under Government Code Section 3303, dismissal, demotion, suspension, reduction in salary, or transfer for the purposes of punishment with the reduction in pay.
Yes.
The dismissal, demotion, and suspension already have the right to come before the Commission.
Correct.
What I'm getting at is this in between here, this written reprimand. It's a punitive action, but if there's no loss in pay, then that individual would not be able to come. What I'm trying to get at here is whether or not we're going to be bombarded, with police officers that have been given a written reprimand.
This item involves transfers only. So what we're dealing with is the issue of a transfer that's based on deficient performance or for disciplinary reasons. So practically how that would work, we'd have to figure it out, but essentially what I envision is a situation where, let's say an officer is transferred and the officer believes that the transfer was for disciplinary or deficient performance reasons. That officer will be given a document indicating what the reasons are. That officer can make a decision as to whether or not an appeal is appropriate. If the department is just taking a position that it's a routine transfer, that it's not for disciplinary or performance reasons, then an initial review could be done, and who's going to do the initial review, not clear yet, but perhaps HR can do the initial review and determine whether or not there's a reason to go forward with an appeal to the civil service. So I think there would be some mechanism to review to determine whether it's routine or not. But it seems to me that based on the law that we've cited for the Commission, there has to be some sort of administrative process that would permit an officer in the situation to come before this body and make their case, so to speak, that it's not warranted.
So hypothetically, if somebody received a written reprimand in the police department, filed a written mandate in Superior Court...
We're not talking about a written reprimand. This is exclusive. This is exclusively...
I understand that. What I'm getting at, what I'm trying to get at, and evidently I'm not doing a very good job, is why written reprimand is even mentioned in here then.
Well, that's the government code, and that is mentioned in that situation. We're not addressing that with this proposal. So, I mean, to the extent that, I think nothing would change with respect to written reprimands, and we're not proposing a change.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
The Peace Officer Bill of Rights does require some form of an administrative review on written reprimands, and that's different from the way any other city employee is treated. Ms. Marino is not proposing that written reprimands be brought before this commission. What she is proposing, and this is based on all of these cases that are laid out, are the situations where there's a loss of compensation or a loss of a perceived property interest right. An officer is working on the K-9 unit, and they're doing a poor job, and they're removed from the K-9 unit. They're still a police officer, but they're not earning that extra, whatever it is, 5% or extra $300 a month that they were getting for being the K-9 officer.
Mm-hmm.
That's the situation we're talking about, where we're talking about a loss in pay. And again, the case law is pretty clear in that direction, that some sort of evidentiary procedure is required in that case.
With respect to written reprimands, and maybe this answers the question, written reprimands do not require an administrative review at this level. So even though the code does mention that, that's not what we're here to propose today with respect to written reprimands. We are exclusively proposing the issue of transfer, and the case law would support that.
I appreciate that, and I'm really not trying to give anybody a hard time. I just want to make it very clear in my own mind, because if somebody in the police department gets a written reprimand, 3 months later they've got their annual performance review, and they're denied a merit increase. What happens then?
Well,
I mean, the odds of it happening are probable as opposed to possible.
Well, actually, in my experience, there has been one case presented to the Civil Service Commission involving the removal of the M-step. So that's another issue. But with respect to written reprimands, I don't anticipate anything changing in that regard, and we're not proposing any change.
Well, can I chime in?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just...
It says any action, I repeat again, punitive action, any action that may lead to dismissal, demotion, suspension, reduction in salary, written reprimand, and transfer for purpose of punishment requires an administrative appeal hearing. That's what I'm reading, and I've seen this section before. And transfer for purpose of punishment, it doesn't say transfer for purpose of reduction in pay. So if there is an actual transfer, and that transfer is considered to be by the employee or anyone as a punishment for something they've done, testimony in front of the Civil Service Commission, some other action that they've taken, that specifically is a hearing that person has a right to come in front of us as a punitive measure. If you're transferring someone to another department, which that department head is going to give them a lower M-step, is going to prevent them from being promoted, is going to prevent them from doing something, they have a complete right, even under a written reprimand, to come in front of us and present evidence, and for us to determine if that evidence is right or wrong. But it is not a right of the HR or anyone else. It is an administrative hearing if they're being discriminated against, being prevented from being, maybe I don't like an employee, I transfer him to a different department, keep him at the same pay, but trust me, that department becomes a dead zone, and they never come out of that department, they never get promoted from that department. Trust me, that's a punitive action, and that is considered to be for the purposes of punishment. So I'm not really sure if I agree with this legal opinion as to loss of pay for being the only reason that somebody could actually come in front of us or have an administrative hearing. So I don't really, I think that this is in my opinion, incomplete review until we know what our rights are on the other ones, which I was going to ask for this to get a outside legal opinion anyways, I would not be very comfortable in voting on this particular issue.
Well, again, this particular issue is just regarding transfers that are based on deficient performance or for discipline where there is a loss of pay. If we're talking about routine transfers, those transfers would not be a part of this. If there are other reasons that an employee feels that there is action being taken, there are avenues and remedies available. But we feel that the law in this situation requires an administrative hearing. There's one case that we've cited to that discusses how that administrative hearing has to be a full evidentiary hearing. So what the department's been doing to date may not conform to what these cases are saying. So that's why we're coming before this commission to address this issue. We feel that it is important, and we feel that this commission could go ahead and authorize that opportunity for these employees who may feel that that they're entitled to a hearing based on the law and the section cited as well as the cases cited.
Well, if the case law that's being cited in this is why you're here today for a change. The main one before the California Supreme Court's been on the books for over a quarter of a century.
Which one are you referring to?
White versus the County of Sacramento.
Yes. Well, remember, that case dealt with a transfer based on deficient performance with loss of pay. The court in that case said that is disciplinary. So, that case is a Supreme Court decision, but there were some other issues in this matter. For example, the MOU. There was some language in the MOU about how that case is specifically waived, and so we had to look at that and determine whether or not, that is correct or not. We're taking the position, and I think it's a more conservative legal opinion, to allow an employee to come before the commission and assert their right to an administrative appeal.
I have Mr. Devine.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and the only thing that you're asking us to look at tonight is the statement, all parties agree that based on the above cases, when a police officer is transferred for performance or disciplinary reasons and suffers a loss of pay, that officer should be afforded the right to appeal that decision to the Civil Service Commission.
Correct.
Nothing else.
Nothing else.
And by taking this action, we are not taking away any rights or privileges that officers may have already.
No, nothing is being taken away. In effect, it would be affording them an opportunity that hasn't been afforded to them. So we think it's giving something.
So
on this issue only.
Yeah.
So everything else will remain the same based on whatever laws and remedies currently are available to employees.
So I understand what the chairman is saying and Mr. Coleman regarding their concerns about, other issues that may be involved in here. It appears to me by approving this, all we're doing is saying that when a police officer is transferred for performance or disciplinary reasons, suffers a loss of pay, he can appeal to his commission. And that will not in any way affect what is already on the books as far as the privileges of officers for other types of disciplinary actions or hearings.
Okay. Gantis?
Well, I'm kind of at a loss here. I mean, if it's required by law, what do we need to act on? Why are we even acting? I mean, do we approve every time if there was a dismissal, because it's under the same code section as dismissal, we have to approve having a hearing here? It's mandated.
Well, that's certainly one way to look at it. The rules aren't particularly clear. I mean, one consideration may be to amend the rules to make it clear. But if
what do the rules say?
Well, the rules indicate under.
Not in here, is it?
No. It's under the civil service rules.
Can I see a copy of the rules, Mr. Braden, please?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Gantis, the rules address disciplinary actions, and there's a lot of specific references to reduction in pay, suspensions, demotions, and terminations. Doesn't cover everything, and all we're doing here is is indicating that our interpretation of the case law is that to protect the city and certainly to protect the rights of these employees, these officers, that these types of cases really ought to come before the civil service when they do occur.
And I would just reiterate, if I may, that if the employee so requests, so it really affords the employee an opportunity to come before this commission and assert whatever case they want to assert with regards to the transfer under these circumstances where there's a loss of pay for disciplinary or performance reasons.
Well, my issue in here, to be very honest with you, is this, that I believe that the role of the Civil Service Commission has been narrowed to as small of a role as possibly could be interpreted under the charter. And I think that's wrong. I think that the Civil Service Commission has a much broader role in ensuring that the hiring and firing of individual or demotions or promotions, which goes directly to their hiring or their discipline, is done in a neutral basis without any discrimination, without any problems. That is my issue, and I believe that Section 33 or 3 should be interpreted much wider and with much more power. That would, and I believe that it gives the Civil Service Commission on police action, first of all, and reading the charter gives the Civil Service a much wider rights than what is being requested tonight. And to be very honest with you, it's very interesting that this thing came in front of us on a night that I was actually going to ask for an outside counsel review of this particular issue. It baffles me as to how it all of a sudden appeared in front of us without anything else. But regardless, I'm not going to vote in favor of this because I believe that by voting in limiting something, it prevents us from looking at other options. And as such, I'm not going to vote for this. I believe that there needs to be a full-on review of 3303 and the rights the Civil Service Commission has, and a review of the charter to see what rights does the Civil Service Commission has as a body to review either discrimination against a particular ethnic group, discrimination against a particular individual for their religious purposes, for their ethnicity, for their gender. And I think that I don't know if we have an opinion from Mr. Braden. I would like to see an outside opinion on that, and that outside opinion should also include this particular recommendation. As such, I won't be voting in favor of this particular issue tonight.
Mr. Chair, I just reiterate, this item is not about the rights of the Commission. This item is about the rights of officers, and we believe, again, that this is what we should be offering as a protection to our officers who feel that they've been unjustly removed from assignment in a similar fashion as if they're being unjustly removed from their position, either through demotion or termination or whatever the case may be. So, again, this is not limiting anything. This is an expansion.
Mr. Braden, I'm saying that you're limiting the officers. Mr. Doyle. Mr. Doyle, I'm saying that you're limiting the officers' right to appear in front of the Civil Service Commission by just saying that they only have a right to appear in front of us for just transfers on a loss of pay. I believe that it's much broader on the under the 3303, and I think it's a much broader under the actual charter language it's very specific in the charter. And that's the problem that I have. I don't think you're giving the officers the big, much larger base. I think you're limiting the officers' right to appear in front of the Civil Service Commission, and I don't appreciate that. I don't think it's right. And that's what the problem that I have with this particular bulletin. And I will still vote against it. The reason is not because I don't believe that this officer should have a right, but I think that the officer should have much broader rights to come in front of the Civil Service Commission if they believe that they're being discriminated against, if they're being transferred for purpose of punishment, if they're being transferred for giving a continuous written reprimand because they're of a particular ethnicity, and then they're transferred. This just limits their rights to come in front of the Civil Service Commission, and I completely disagree with it.
Let me ask a question, because I'm tending to agree with Commissioner Karian, which is not good for you. So you better be convincing here. I guess I'm just not understanding. Well, I read the rule. Mr. Braden, are we saying the rule that was on page 36 now does not say that a transfer for purposes of punishment is not, it's under the government code. Is that not included in what is governed by Article 24, Section 9 of the Charter? I think it is. Now, there's no limitation. It says including but not limited to. I'm just not understanding why we're here. And therefore, as a result of that, it can be construed as somewhat limiting. And while I may not agree with Mr. Abkarian's total points, the point is, it seems to me, that any punitive action as defined in Government Code Section 3303, and I would make that motion, that any punitive action subject to Government Code Section 3303 is subject to our rules regarding hearings as articulated in Article 24. I think it's Article 24, Section 9 of the Charter. Am I misconstruing something? Because it seems to me it's required.
I believe yes. With respect to written reprimands, that in particular, I think that the case law, and I don't have a case here to cite to you today, but the written reprimands do not require an administrative review by a Civil Service Commission. The other items, dismissal, certainly Civil Service Commission has authority to review those if there's an appeal. Demotions as well, suspensions. And we're talking here about...
How does written reprimand, which is in the exact same sentence as transfer for purposes without punishment, how is that different?
I wish I had the authority to provide that. I wasn't expecting that to be an issue, but...
It's a major issue.
I'm seeing that. But I believe that there is a case out there that indicates that administrative review by the chief is sufficient with respect to written reprimands. So...
Can I direct my question, Mr. Chairman, may I direct my questions to Mr. Braden, please? Mr. Braden, that question about what's included, what you were going to answer that, I assume.
Well, yeah, and let me try to give a little explanation before I get into the actual answer of the specific question. The Charter provides jurisdiction to the Commission on Disciplinary Actions for matters in which an individual is reduced in rank or grade, removed, or suspended. And that is the limit of the Civil Service Commission on Disciplinary Action. Now, that has been expanded somewhat through the Civil Service Rules, as you've alluded to on page 36, to include suspension of pay with pending investigation, mandatory drug or alcohol rehabilitation. The Government Code section that's been referenced in the report requires some kind of an evidentiary hearing on the matters as discussed in that Government Code section. That is transfers, demotions, suspensions. It does not, of course, the Government Code, which was adopted long after the enactment of the Glendale Charter and embodiment of the Civil Service Commission, and the Government Code does not require a evidentiary hearing before this body, that is the Civil Service Commission. It just requires an evidentiary hearing of before in some means, but it does not give jurisdiction to the Civil Service Commission over these particular matters. What the police department is requesting is that in the case where a transfer is punitive in nature, disciplinary in nature, or punitive in nature, and results in a loss of pay, that the commission accept jurisdiction over those matters. And arguably, and I have not researched this because I've not been a part of this process, but arguably that would comport with the Charter, which provides that the Civil Service Commission does have jurisdiction where there's a reduction in rank or grade. So from that perspective, without researching it in detail myself, I I could say that it would seem to fit within the general jurisdiction of the Civil Service Commission because there's been a loss of pay, which could comport to the caveat that the Civil Service Commission does have jurisdiction where there's a reduction in rank or grade.
So, where are you in the charter that says what we're supposed to do in terms of our hearing procedures?
That's Article 24, Section 9.
9. Well, it talks about transfer, demotion, reinstatement. That's not that.
Let me just while you're looking at that, Mr. That's exactly what I'm. Article 24, Civil Service, Section 2, reads as follows.
All right, let's stay with it.
I'm going to. It says the Commission shall prescribe, amend, and enforce rules for the classified service subject to the approval of the City Council, which shall have the force and effect of law, shall keep minutes of its proceeding and records of its examination, and shall, as a board through a single commissioner, make investigation, or as a board or through a single commissioner, make investigation concerning the enforcement effect of this article and of the rules and efficiency of the service. And then it enumerates 14 items that tells us what we do, but you can't separate the first paragraph from the rest. It specifically gives us the right under the charter, not under our civil service rules. The charter gives us the right under separate rules to ensure that the service is done properly, it's not being discriminative. And that first paragraph gives the Civil Service Commission the right to investigate anything that affects that service. Plain and simple. It's there in black and white. And how we are being limited, not by you, Mr. Moreno, by the Civil Service Commission, I don't understand, because that first paragraph, the charter has made it very clear what our investigative rights of the Civil Service Commission are. So I need to do, I think this is just not a complete. I know what your request is, Ms. Moreno. I appreciate it. I know that your purpose is to provide more broader rights to the officers than we have now. But to be very honest with you, I don't believe that the charter is being interpreted as broadly as it should be to give us even more powers, that the officers have more rights to come in front of us. Not just officers, but we have investigative right over anything that involves the service. And this is one of the issues that I have, that we have this holding that, in my opinion, once we put it forth, limits our ability to investigate all the other issues. Mr. Devine?
Again, I understand or hear what you're saying, but I'd like if you could explain to me on the recommendation that's before us how that limits any of the powers of the commission or takes away the rights of the officers. Just on that one paragraph, I'd like to understand your thinking on how that is limiting or taking away powers or not complying with the provisions of the charter.
I'm saying that I can't vote on this one issue because I think that this issue actually should have included everything in the Government Code Section 3303. And why would I vote on something where it narrowly allows us to do something when we have a right to do all the rest of the stuff? So I don't understand why I would be voting on a narrow issue where I could be voting on something much larger.
Well, I think you just answered that. You said that we have rights to do all those other things that are spelled in the charter.
Well, I mean, for now they were told that we don't because of what Mr. Brayton has given us previously, but I disagree.
I just don't see or understand, and I'd like to see your way, but understand how this is taking away or limiting our authority at all. Let me ask a question also of the attorney. Let's say we don't adopt this, and tomorrow a police officer is transferred for disciplinary reasons, and he has a loss of pay. And again, we haven't adopted this. Does he have the right to appeal to this commission?
Well, currently, there's no indication that he does, and that's why we're here today.
Okay, no, but let me ask this. He comes to whatever authority he needs to go to and says, I want to appeal this to the Civil Service Commission. Would he be denied that ability?
Well, hopefully the commission would allow the officer to come before it and present his situation. So I would hope that the commission would allow that
Well,
opportunity.
would the appointing authority or Mr. Doyle, would your department, if he filed such a appeal, would you say, I'm sorry, the charter doesn't allow this, or would you let him appeal this to the commission? Would you let the appeal come to the commission for our consideration?
May I clarify, Mr. Chairman?
No, what's that?
Commissioner Devine? It would be in those situations where, again, there's a loss of pay and there's a transfer for purposes of performance or discipline. So in those situations, that opportunity should be afforded, and that's all we're requesting at this
I
point.
know,
So-
but I'm asking, without our approving this, if that happens tomorrow, would that privilege be afforded to the officer? Could he appeal to us? It's a yes or no answer.
Right now, there's nothing that indicates that that officer could come, but I would suggest that if that person were to come before the commission, that the commission would entertain that request.
And Mr. Doyle, what would your office say at that point?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Devine, we would be in front of you with the recommendation that this commission grant that person a civil service appeal hearing.
Regardless of how we vote on it.
That is correct. That would be our recommendation, again, to protect the interests of the city and to protect the interests of that officer.
Mr. Chairman?
Scantus.
But without that, I mean, as I understand this issue, you say written reprimands, and previous to this action, this writ of mandate being brought by this sergeant, let me just back up a minute. If this were passed today, is it the intention of the city then to go to the Superior Court and say, okay, he's now has not exhausted his administrative remedies, so he's got to go back to the Civil Service Commission?
I'm not handling the litigation in that particular matter, but
Is
that
Ms.
may
Maurer?
be-
I see Ms. Maurer back there.
She's here.
Let's bring Ms. Maurer up here.
That definitely could be a possibility. What is the officer's remedy? And the remedy may be to have a court say, well, go to civil service.
Officer Mario, are you in on this thing? Have you been consulted on this at all? Okay, see, I don't like this without them being. Let me ask this question. Ms. Maurer, can you afford any more light on that issue of whether or not, as a result of this, because clearly...
Well, Mr. Gansas, you can't ask about their legal strategy at this point.
Well, I think...
To be fair to the city attorney's office, if you're going to vote, you have to vote with the worst-case scenario in front of you. But to ask the city attorney
Let
to
me
give
ask this question.
their legal strategy would not be
That's
fair.
fine. I'll agree with you there. Then let me ask this question. Would it be Ms. Marino, by doing this, does this, in your mind, set this up as a level of and a required administrative appeal before going to the Superior Court for a writ of mandate?
I would say in that situation, yes.
Now, wouldn't that then have to be done through an amendment to the rules rather than a motion by this commission? Because clearly under the charter we are setting up, if we do a rule, that has the force and effect of a law. It is not, I mean, this is my concern. I'm just not sure we're doing the right thing. I think it needs to be done by a rule and not by a motion, because then it has the effect of law. I don't think that that we, as a Civil Service Commission, can create a level of administrative appeal without such a thing. I really don't.
Certainly, the department wouldn't be opposed to a clarification or an amendment to the rules that would actually clarify this issue.
Boy, this is Mr. Braden, am I on the wrong, barking up the wrong tree? I mean, I don't think we're setting up something that has the force of law that creates a level of administrative appeal that would blunt the writ of mandate.
Well, I think you're on the right track. It seems to me there's one of two ways for the commission to handle this. Number one, in cases where an officer has been transferred, which results in a loss of pay, and if he or she appeals that to the Civil Service Commission, there could be an argument before the commission as to whether under the charter the commission has or does not have jurisdiction, and the commission could render its ruling under those circumstances, whether it does or does not have jurisdiction. And of course any ruling of the commission will be subject to writ of mandate by a disgruntled or dissatisfied party, or the other way, and I think you're right, Mr. Gantis, that would be, it would require, if the commission decided to go down the path that's being requested by a department, it would require a rule amendment, and the agenda item is phrased broadly enough that we could actually craft that amendment tonight and then send it to City Council for approval, if that's the way you wanted to go.
I would be more comfortable doing a rule amendment, only because I'm just not, no one's convinced me so far that what we're doing accomplishes what you want to do. I really do, and I think it creates a level of litigation as to the issue of whether or not it even does that is detrimental to the police officer and somewhat detrimental to the city. If what you want to do is create a rule, then let's do it. That's I think what's from the beginning. My notes were, what are we doing? And I'm now understanding what you want to do, and I don't necessarily oppose what you want to do. I oppose the procedure of doing it. So if we can craft it in form of a amendment to the rules, I think all we have to do is amend Rule 10, Section 1, Roman numeral 10, Section 1, subsection A under authority, just to add all, to what comes under that. Transfers due to performance or punitive reasons resulting in a loss of pay? Is that right?
Or disciplinary.
Well, you figure out the wording. That's what you get the big bucks for. And or Ms. Marino, both. I mean,
The department would not oppose such a action, because I think that's essentially what we're requesting. So it would clarify the procedure. It would enable police officers in this situation to be able to come before the commission. So I think that would satisfy what we're seeking today.
I would move Mr. Gantis's suggestion.
It's my suggestion. Why can't I move it?
Hold on. Let me just make one statement, and then you can
okay.
move forward with your commission.
We need language.
I think that if you're going to amend the rules, that we should actually amend the rules to include a whole lot more than just what's being proposed, and that's why I'm against the amendment to the rules, and sending an amendment to the rule. If we try to amend it again, we have to go back to the city council again in 3 months, and these things are not easy. First of all, we needed to review the rules anyways, because there were some changes, and we'll discuss that at some point when we're looking at I think it might be actually in the calendar.
Mr. Chair, for the August 27th meeting, I have two items that you had requested to be placed on. One having to do with the legal opinion on the authority of the commission to investigate harassment and or discrimination, and the other item being consideration of rule amendments. Several that did not pass the last time you wanted brought back, and so we're fully prepared to bring those back as was originally scheduled.
Well, 37 of them were approved, 5 were not.
The 5 that were not were the ones that were
And there might be new changes. I mean,
well, we're not saying we're not going to do it, but I think in this case, they've come to us. I'm more comfortable doing it as a rule amendment. It's not foreclosing the other issues there. You want more rule amendments? I'm ready to consider them at that time. But I think this issue, I'm more comfortable doing a rule amendment because then it has the, quote, force and effect of law as stated in the charter, and I think gives more protection to the city and actually protects the officers from having to bring up an argument of whether or not there is jurisdiction here, another level of writ of mandate, further bogging down the whole process that we don't want to bog down anyway. So I think this is in the efficiency of the service, if you will, quoting and that this amendment to the rules, we're not foreclosing yours. This takes care of this issue, and we will take care of any other issues at that time. We can go do it in this. You now have this rule. We'll bring it up at that time. But at this particular time, did you come up with some language, Mr. Braden, for the big bucks?
I did.
Good. What am I moving? What is Mr. Devine moving? No, Mr. Devine.
And Mr. Gannis is moving.
I don't care.
it would be a motion to amend Civil Service Rules, Rule 10, Section 1, subsection B, to add after the term alcoholic rehabilitation, the following phrase: appeals of police officers who are transferred for disciplinary, punitive, or performance reasons which results in loss of pay. So that the entire section, if amended, would read as follows: disciplinary actions shall include, but are not limited to, removal, suspensions without pay, suspensions with pay pending investigation, mandatory drug or alcohol rehabilitation, appeals of police officers who are transferred for disciplinary, punitive, or performance reasons which result in a loss of pay, mandatory employee assistance counseling, and temporary or permanent reductions in classification or pay.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Motion by Mr. Giantis. There's a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman?
No.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Commissioner Carrion?
No. Motion fails.
Next item, please.
Well, wait, do we want to make, well, then I would make a motion. Are we going to have the same vote on just the motion they're asking? Because if then I won't make the motion. Well, I like the motion. I make a motion that we approve the request as set forth in the report.
Second.
There's a motion.
I think you're ultimately would have to result in a rule change. I think you're correct.
I know that. Let's go. We have a motion.
A motion and a second. Can we get a roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Chair Carrion?
No. Next item, please.
Report on fire department hiring.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this item is a report on fire department hiring. This is a significant project that has been in the works for several months. We've had significant involvement by the staff in gathering lots of data from a variety of sources. There were some very good findings and very interesting things that came out of this, which we hope to discuss. Ultimately, we talked to a lot of people, and I think we have some new ideas, new strategies that are worth considering. What I'll do, I'll kind of go through the report sort of step by step and talk about some of the procedures that were done. But we also have a PowerPoint which kind of hits the highlights, and that's more so for the audience and people at home who want to follow along and see what some of the figures are that we have that we gathered. This item, as you know, came about from a meeting that was held earlier this year addressing fire department hiring, the last couple of recruit academies, and there was significant discussion relating to the ethnic makeup of the fire department and those particular academies. And there was some concern expressed by both the commission, members of the audience, about the diversity of our fire department relative to both females and fully African Americans. And I think before drawing any conclusions as to the reasons for those disparities, the Commission made a very good recommendation, and that was to obtain the facts and to have us gather some information to see how we do compare with some of the other agencies, labor market cities, and other departments throughout the country. In fact, and I think again, this is more than just gathering information. It's hoping to solicit some ideas and suggestions, new strategies that we can consider. We've tried a lot of things over the years, particularly on the issue of hiring more females, and our success has been obviously mixed on that from that standpoint, but the goal here is to try and get some good strategies and some new ideas that hopefully will get us more towards embellishing our diversity in that area. The methodology for this report was largely driven by the staff, and we contacted 22 fire departments throughout the area in three different groups. First being a survey of our labor market cities. These are the cities that we utilize for labor relations purposes when we are doing salary surveys and things like that. These tend to be agencies that are similar in size to us. They're full-service cities, generally between 100,000 and 400,000 in population, similar geography. And typically we have 10 cities in our labor market. You'll see in this survey only 9 were surveyed. As recently, the Inglewood Fire Department, which is a labor market city, they were swallowed up by the LA County Fire Department. So there's just 9 right now. And those are Anaheim, Burbank, Garden Grove, Huntington Beach, Long Beach, Pasadena, Santa Ana, Santa Monica, and Torrance. We also looked at what we call the Area C neighboring jurisdictions, and these are the jurisdictions that have been defined by the State of California Office of Emergency Services that are pretty much our partner agencies that we work directly with them, and a lot of our fire and emergency operations, and it's often been described as a sort of a seamless fire department or a borderless fire department. If there's a significant incident occurring in Glendale, along with any of these jurisdictions, we all employ our resources in a similar fashion. These jurisdictions are mostly in the San Gabriel Valley area, a lot of small to medium-sized cities. They also include, Area C, I believe, also includes Burbank, which is also a labor market city. But we looked at them as well because they are, again, a partner group of agencies that we partner with on many significant emergency incidents. Additionally, we also looked at other selected large agencies throughout the country, just to kind of see, these very large agencies typically have a lot of resources to employ in outreach, and we hope to find some good ideas from these agencies, and a special focus being on San Diego and San Francisco, because those are 2 agencies that are perceived to have done very well, particularly on the issue of hiring females. In addition to contacting these agencies, and again, we talked to people in their human resources departments and their fire departments, and got some feedback and data ideas. In addition to that, we also talked with a lot of our folks in the fire department, including Chief Scoggins. Right about this time, he was newly appointed as fire chief. We talked to the Firefighter Association, other management staff. We also spent a significant amount of time with Captain Davis, Joanne Davis, who is our sole female firefighter, who again had a lot of really outstanding ideas. In addition to that, we also reviewed some articles, and we provided 2 articles in your report. One from the Los Angeles Weekly that I think the commission had requested that we include that. Talked a lot about some of the efforts that City of Los Angeles has made in hiring women, and also we were able to find a rather interesting article, which was it's more of a research paper published by the International Association of Women in the Fire and Emergency Services, which talks about the challenges in hiring females, and really reinforcing that the pool of interested female and qualified females is very, very small. Getting into the findings of our study, looking first at our labor market cities, And I think, looking at labor market cities, the Area C cities, and even the large departments, find two, I'd say, pretty significant findings. First being that Glendale's diversity relative to females and African Americans is not extraordinarily different than what exists in these neighboring jurisdictions. The second major finding is that all of these organizations have a significantly more flexible hiring process, and by that I mean their selection structure, their selection rules provide the appointing authority a great deal more flexibility than we really have, and I'll get into that a little bit more. Looking specifically at the labor market cities, we find very good diversity relative to African Americans and females in two agencies, Long Beach and Pasadena. The rest are similar to Glendale. As you see in all of the other ones, as far as the number of females, there's between 0 and 3 in their entire departments. A similar situation with African Americans, where again, with the exception of Long Beach and Pasadena, which do in fact have a significant African American population, you do find that Glendale's diversity from that regard is fairly consistent with the labor market. The other component, as I've already addressed, deals with the selection process and the rules that we're governed by. And as you can see, all of these particular agencies in our labor market utilize a process called banding, which some of you may or may not be familiar with that, but essentially banding enables the appointing authority to really consider a significantly larger and broader pool of candidates on the eligibility list, as opposed to under our system where we have, again, candidates placed on a list, they're ranked, and our appointing authority is limited to just 3 names for each opening, and that's what's known as the rule of 3, and that's mandated by not just our civil service rules, but it's embedded into the Glendale City Charter. This again is not to be construed as any kind of an excuse for any lack of diversity or lack of hiring, but it is a fact that that process does make it substantially more challenging to consider a broader pool of candidates once that list does get established. And again, as you see, all of the other labor market cities utilize the banding method in their hiring. And if we could go and do the next, the one that describes banding, just to make sure the Commission understands how the rule of 3 works versus some of the other options that are out there that other agencies utilize. Again, Glendale operates under what's called the rule of 3, and under such a rule of 3, the appointing authority, in this case it would be the fire chief, in other cases it would be department heads. If there are, say, as an example, 6 vacancies, under Glendale's rule of 3, the appointing authority would really only be given the opportunity to go down the list and consider 3 names for each vacancy, which provides them with 2 additional names in addition to the person that's selected. As a result, if there are 3 vacancies, the appointing authority would only be given the opportunity to consider a total of 8 candidates. Under a different process, say a rule of 5, for example, that would provide a little bit more flexibility, where instead of just 3 choices, there'd be 5 options for each vacancy. And under that same scenario, you would have, say, just 6 vacancies. The appointing authority would have the opportunity to reach down further on the list and consider 10 candidates. There's another agency utilizes something called the 3 names per vacancy, and that's the City of San Diego.
Bill, just a quick note. Rule of 3
with 6 vacancies, we'll give you 8 candidates because you can get 2 more than the actual vacancies available.
That's correct.
And then rule of 5 will give you 10 because you can do an additional 4 over and above the 10. Okay.
That's correct. That's correct.
So in a scenario where you have 3 names per vacancy, and that's, and we'll see when we look at the City of San Diego, they have, if there are 6 vacancies, multiply 6 by 3, they get to consider 18 candidates. And this is kind of a continuum from the least flexible to the more flexible. You see under banding, which is a very, very flexible system where a list is established and people are ranked essentially from 100 down to 90 to 80 to 70. What you'll see is a scenario where Band A would be people with scores of 90 to 100. Band B would be people with scores of 80 to 90. And Band C would be scores of 70 through 80. And this is just an example. It's done very differently in each agency. And under such a scenario, there might be 25 names in that first band where the appointing authority might be able to explore as far as making their final hiring decision. If they get down to the next band, there might be another additional 30 names. There might be more names beyond that if they reach the third band. That's just an example of how banding works in general. Then the most flexible, and there's a couple of agencies that utilize this, is what's called the rule of the list, and that essentially means that any candidate who makes the list, the eligibility list, can be reached and certified and be given a job offer. And that basically says, a candidate who scores 98 is basically in the same band or same group as somebody who may perhaps have scored 75 or even 70. Again, whether this is the right thing to do or not, this is more or less how it works. In our last firefighter recruit process, we created a list, and there ended up being 74 names on that list. Again, people of all ages, ethnicity, diversity, male, female. Had we been able, if we had a position or a structure that called for the rule of the list, the appointing authority could have essentially gone down that list and looked at any candidate amongst the 74 and made an appointment off of that
So,
that
ask
list.
a question.
Sure.
I don't mean to cut you off while you're doing your presentation, but I'll forget. But can you do a specific recruitment for female firefighters? Can you have a bulletin that just says that? Not for Armenian-speaking.
Yeah, those are essentially skill-based recruitments where there's a bona fide occupational reason for it, similar to where, and in that case it was language. And the other one that pops into my mind is the jailer position, where we're absolutely required to have a certain number of females working in the jail to deal with strip searches and things like that. There has to be some type of bona fide occupational requirement in order to do a gender specific exam. So anyway, why don't we go back, unless there's any questions on that, and we can, again, I'll take your questions throughout this. Why don't we go back to the Area C agencies. Again, the findings that we have in our Area C, once again, Glendale's numbers compare equal, if not more favorable in some regards than these agencies. And again, these are much smaller agencies which hire probably less frequently than Glendale's, but again, you have 4 of these 7 agencies that have no females at all. Monterey Park has 2 females, including their chief is a female. The other remaining agencies have just 1. Similar finding with regard to African Americans. Glendale, having 6 African Americans, including the chief, has a higher rate than looks like all of the other agencies combined almost. These agencies, a little bit of a mixed bag as far as what their selection rules require. You see Alhambra with a rule of 3, Monterey Park has a rule of 3, San Gabriel has rule of the list, South Pasadena has banding, Monrovia also has rule of the list. San Marino, probably the smallest department, they really have, for lack of a better term, no rules that we could discern, other than they utilize, I think, an auxiliary program where they essentially transition their auxiliaries into sworn firefighting positions. Moving on to these large agencies, again, these are significantly large agencies, and we only looked at female diversity on this simply because it was hard enough gathering this information to begin with. We have no relationship with any of these agencies, Chicago and New York City, but it didn't seem appropriate for me to compare our African American candidate population with a city such as Chicago or New York or even LA City for that matter, each of which has significantly larger African American population than Glendale. So we focused on females, and once again you see a bit of a mixed bag here.
Can I make one suggestion? I really think that you went one step too high with this the last chart. I appreciate that. I think that's great that you've actually gone to. I mean, this report is just incredible. It's an eye-opening report, and I want to talk about this report anyways, because I think it changes a lot of perceptions. But to go to Chicago or go to New York.
We didn't do any trips to Chicago. That would have been nice.
No. When I say go, I mean like to actually extend the report to include them. That's what I meant when I say go. Might be a little bit of a. Statistics are very strange. When you have to compare apples with apples, and I think now we're comparing apple with oranges. So. If you want to make a comment on this, we can, but we can just
sure. Again, the goal was to see what's out there, what other agencies are doing, and as I said, a lot of these agencies have substantial resources to commit to outreach, and we wanted to hear about that. I think that was the main point of this, was to get some ideas, get some new strategies, things that we have not tried. And San Diego, and the other thing, we wanted to have the opportunity to look in more depth at San Diego and San Francisco in particular. San Diego was mentioned numerous times by a member of the audience back in February about how well they're doing, and an erroneous figure was continually thrown out that their department consisted of 1/3 female, which, as you see, it's certainly not true. San Diego has a large number of females, undoubtedly, but it's 9.72%, not 33%. San Francisco even better. And I'll spend as much time with these as you would like, Mr. Chair, but we did get some good ideas from this, and if I could highlight some of those, was talking about some of the things, particularly those agencies that are doing well. San Francisco, for example. San Diego. I mean, these are departments that do more recruiting more frequently. They employ a lot of resources, particularly female firefighters, towards that effort. They do have a lot more money than we have as far as being able to throw at that situation. But we came up with some good thoughts on these agencies. One thing I do want to point out with these large agencies, particularly the ones that are doing well, and even the ones that aren't doing quite so well, that at least 4 of them that I know of were subject to some form of a consent decree mandated by a federal court action. The ones that I'm aware of, City of LA had a consent decree from 1974 to 2001, essentially setting goals and timetables for hiring females and minorities. I believe LA County had one in the early 80s, which switched their hiring process for a long period of time from a traditional Rule of 3 type situation to a banding effort, which they employed during most of the 80s and 90s. Now I believe LA County is back with a Rule of 5, is what our latest information is. Let's see. San Diego also was subject to a consent decree, and that took effect in 1974, which again increased the pressure on hiring women and minorities. San Francisco as well was subject to a consent decree. Amazingly, with San Francisco, prior to 1987, they had no female firefighters at all. And today, out of 1,600 sworn personnel, they have 192 female firefighters, which, as you can see, is 12% of their department. And what they did was took a lot of the emphasis in their selection process away from physical agility toward more of a written and verbal, greater focus on candidates' background and education as opposed to purely physical. So, if you'd like, we'll then now go into the strategies. These are just a few things. It's not an exhaustive list, but a couple things that really stuck out that we have not specifically made any effort to do in the past. Again, we've tried a lot of things, but I think a focus on college athletes is a good idea. This was something that the Firefighter Association thought was good, and it's just the idea that given the physical requirements of this position in the fire service, that college athletic programs are going to be a pretty ideal source of people who are used to that type of physical conditioning, and hopefully that would help us. Similarly, people with military backgrounds, we have not done any specific targeted outreach to people in the military, and again, we're talking male and female. Military has always been said is probably one of the most diverse organizations around, and I think, again, if we made some contacts from those sources to find people who are used to working in a paramilitary regimented organization, that type of a background would probably assist in making it through the selection process, certainly through the academy. It's very paramilitary, as well as the probationary period. The concept of a single function paramedic has come up before, and we all know that a lot of the fire service is going more into the EMS, the medical side versus fires. And there's a larger proportion of women engaged in paramedic work than there are in traditional firefighter roles. And as the city looks at different ways of providing paramedic service, which Chief Scoggins probably could elaborate upon, this might be an opportunity to bring in more females, and in turn get them exposed to the firefighting type work, and make that transition from paramedic to firefighter a little more easily. Other agencies have done this. City of Pasadena several years ago transitioned a large number of their female paramedics to firefighters, and I believe LA City has had some success in that as well. Another option would be to do continuous recruitments, or if can't do that, more frequent exams. Now this becomes tricky because we have to have the openings, and we also have to have the staffing and the resources available to do these exams. But one of the things we're consistently coming up against when we are out at these job fairs or whatever different event focusing on women or minorities at different colleges is we'll get asked, well, gee, when are you guys recruiting? And if it happens to be a period of time when we're not recruiting, we say, well, here's our business card, but call us, next September we're going to be recruiting. And the minority female candidates for firefighter are so highly sought after by all departments. Chances are those individuals are not going to wait for Glendale to do their recruitment. They're going to take what comes next. And if we're able to do a recruitment process somehow more frequently than we have, which is essentially every 2 years, we might be able to hook some people into our organization, at least get them in the process where they can see the light at the end of the tunnel. This is a strategy which works well, obviously, for some larger agencies, but a little bit of a challenge for an organization our size. So that's one thought. Another thought would be to hire firefighters on a lateral basis from other agencies, and this is something that's been kicked around to provide us with a little more flexibility, similar to the way we do police officer laterals. Glendale is considered somewhat of a desirable department in general, and if we can get candidates from other organizations who want to come here, that would be a great boon for us. The report talks about a process or a concept that might work where we could, on laterals or laterals with a certain number of years of experience in other agencies, we could waive the written exam and simply move them into an oral board to where they're not competing against 3,000 other people, which typically occurs in these large open recruitment processes. And we've had situations. Captain Davis cited an example. She had a lot of friends who were current firefighters with LA City back in the 90s who were very interested in coming to Glendale, but came to the written exam, and some of them were successful, some of them weren't. But if we had a process for simply waiving that written and going right into an oral board, and really having the opportunity to consider these again very qualified, very well established female firefighters to hire for Glendale, that would have been a great opportunity, but opportunity lost at that point. Again, the next bullet talks about expand recruitment and advertising sources. We do a significant amount of advertising now, both and now we're experimenting with different media. We also do various minority publications and journals. We focus on those that are of interest to females, and just taking that a step further into again other media, a consideration of the gay and lesbian community as a potential source for candidates. A lot of events and things that we could be targeting in that front. The next one, PAT certificates, that refers to physical agility test certifications. And this is something that, again, we saw with a lot of other agencies that are doing, LA City, LA County. The way we currently do our physical agility exam is in conjunction with the recruitment process. It's typically the last step. We do a written, we do an oral board, we do the list, and then we have the physical agility. And typically it's all scheduled on one day. All the candidates, or perhaps the top 30, 40 candidates, show up at this at this physical agility exam in their gym shorts and running shoes, and it's sort of a do or die. You pass, you make it. If you don't pass, you don't make it. And what we found, again, through a lot of this research, is that a lot of these physical agility exams, including the one that we use, are offered almost every weekend of the year, where we can allow candidates to go take the exam, get a certificate showing that, hey, I passed this exam, and then they can bring that in to us, and we can accept that as having passed the physical agility exam that we use. It takes a lot of the pressure off, particularly, on that day that we have our exam. If we happen to have a bad day or something like that, it would enable the candidate to take it when they're good and ready, and we by receiving the certification, we have a good general sense that they're qualified. And some agencies will accept these certificates up to a year after the person having taken the test. I wouldn't suggest we do that, but maybe within 2 to 3 months or something along those lines would be reasonable, just to ensure that somebody has the physical agility and physical abilities to succeed as a firefighter and succeed in the academy. Another concept, and these last two are, I would say, somewhat controversial, because there's very strong arguments on both sides. But the whole notion that the ladders that we utilize, that the Glendale Fire Department and most fire departments utilize, wooden ladders, are extremely heavy, and it is the cause for many people, both male and female, to fail in the academy, fail on the physical agility exams. And it's one of those things that if a few agencies, and again, Chief Scoggins could probably elaborate more on that, a few agencies have chosen to go through and utilize the aluminum ladders, which are much lighter, but they have their own safety issues, and there's definite concerns with utilizing aluminum ladders versus the traditional wood ladders. However, the ladders, we continue to hear that these present significant challenges to candidates, both male and female, due to their, and not just their weight, but also when you're in training and when you're drilling, the repetition of doing it over and over again, the body tends to give out, and it ends up being a significant challenge for many. The last one I'll address would be some sort of dialogue relative to the Rule of Three. Now, this came up during the Charter Review Committee, which occurred 4 or 5 years ago, of which Commissioners Epkarian and Coleman were part of, so you'll recall the discussion of this. The Rule of Three is found within Article 24 of the Charter, which again requires that the appointing authority be given no more than three names when there's a vacancy. Some modification of that, whether it's a Rule of Five, whether it's some form of banding, whether it's even the rule of the list, some modification of that would undoubtedly make it a lot more flexible to attain the diversity that we hope to have.
Matt, can I ask a question? Could the Rule of Three be interpreted as allowing 3 candidates per vacancy? Does it prevent us from doing that?
You just took my charter, and the provision that that calls for the Rule of Three specifically says, and it's.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's what you said. You said the Rule of Three. I took your charter, and I was saying, what does it say here?
So it says, here's how it's worded. It says that appointing authority must select from one of the 3 persons standing highest on the appropriate eligible list. That has traditionally meant 1, 2, 3. You get to select one. Next opening, let's say you've selected one, you get to consider 2, 3, and 4. Let's say number 2 is selected, 3, 4, and 5. That's how it goes along. Mr. Braden had a comment, I think.
Yes, and Mr. Doyle is correct. You have to select one of 3 top candidates, and case law has consistently held that that's what you must do. So you can't do it per vacancy or any derivations thereof.
As it said, one of the 3 top candidates for each vacancy.
Unless it said that, yes. But that would require a charter amendment.
Again, members of the commission, that's probably the most radical of the ideas suggested. And as we found from our research, there are a lot of agencies utilizing banding. There are other agencies utilizing other variations of selection rules. Ours are the most rigid, quite frankly. And, it has served us well for probably 100 years. It is a true merit system where the appointing authority can only get the very highest people on the list. So that's I think the intention when the founding fathers wrote this charter many years ago was to ensure that high level of merit. But again, from the other standpoint, it greatly restricts us from seeking a broader pool of candidates for these openings. And I look at some of our neighboring cities and I hear that our academy class has 4 females, 3 blacks, 3 Hispanics, 2 whites, and I ask myself, how in the world did it turn out that way? And typically you find that again, they'll have some form of banding or more flexible pool where they're able to solicit more people within that eligibility list for consideration.
City Council could actually make recommendations for those changes in the next election, if they so desire.
I believe so. Mr. Braden might be more familiar with that process than I, but the charter does, amendment to the charter does have to go to the voters, which is probably the most significant barrier.
Putting it on the actual ballot could be done either by people, by whatever number of signatures they need, or by the City Council. Is that correct? Okay.
So, members of the commission, that concludes this report. Again, we have attached the LA Weekly article. Please realize this isn't an endorsement by staff of the content of the LA Weekly article. They're a journal of opinion, which again it was included here because members of the commission did ask that it be included. Also, the other article or the research paper on women, report card on women firefighting, has a lot of very interesting information as well. There's not a lot, the content from that report within our report, but again, it's there for to kind of expand what we're presenting here. So with that, I want to thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions of myself or staff, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Any comments? Oh, sir. Go ahead.
I have quite a few, but if someone wants to go first.
Go right ahead.
Well, first of all, I want to compliment Mr. Doyle and his staff. I thought the report you put together was outstanding, one of the best I've seen, and I know you have a lot of time and effort, and so you and your staff are to be commended for that. I also learned a great deal from it, so it was much appreciated. In looking at the report and then this national report card on women in firefighting, like you just mentioned a minute ago, there's not a lot that you covered in your report that's in this report card. However, when I tried to look at the big picture, and I know you talked about banding and some of these methods of increasing minorities and women in the fire department, I tried to look at the big picture as to where Glendale was and what we were doing and how your report relates to the national report card. And I came up with a couple of, again, what I call big picture items. First of all, when I looked at the report that the fire departments gave us at our last meeting several months ago, there were 3 reports in there. It's called Firefighter Recruit, and it showed the percentages of males and females that passed the various phases. And there was one in there for 03-05, and when I looked at that, it was interesting to see that the for both male and female, it started out number of applicants applying, and then number appearing at written orals, appeared at orals, passed orals, etc., and invited to physical. And when you do the percentages of dropouts for both the male and female, although the female numbers were much less, the percentages of dropouts were almost the same. And that applied both for 0305, 0507, and 0708. The interesting thing to me was that where the comparison ended was past physical exam, physical agility exam. And that's where, in every case, the women totally dropped off the map. And so that, to me, as a layperson, indicated, number one, that there doesn't appear to be a problem in terms of getting the applicants to file applications, to pass the writtens, to pass the orals. It's pretty uniform for both male and female. And again, where the problem seemed to arise was in passing the physical. So with that in mind, and looking at your report, it was difficult for me to understand whether we adopt a rule of 3 or a rule of 16 or a rule of 20, which applies to picking people off a list, if there's going to be no females on the list because they can't get on the list because they can't pass the physical. So while I see the rules of 3 and whatnot being an excellent tool for reaching many more candidates on the list, in Glendale's situation, there were no female candidates on the list to begin with to reach.
Let me, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Vine, let me correct one thing. The way it occurs, we established the list after the oral board process. So the list is established. The physical agility follows that process. So these are candidates that do make the list, and typically what we'll do is, depending on the number of hires that we have, let's say we're going to hire, 10 people, we may invite 15 or even 20 to the physical agility, and these are people who've made the list. And as you say, the numbers of females passing that is significantly smaller than the numbers of males. But just to clarify, that's how we do the list. And what occurs is, by doing it that way, if any candidate fails the physical agility, they remain on the list. If we go back to that recruitment process, if we go back to that list 6 months later or a year later, we have a second shot at those particular candidates. So that's kind of the positive end of that. But you're absolutely correct. The physical agility is an issue. It certainly is.
Okay. And again, I understand what you're saying, and I realize now that I kind of got the cart before the horse on this in terms of the list.
Okay. I didn't explain that properly.
The bottom line is still that even if they are on the list, they're not passing the physical, so they might as well not be on the list.
That's correct. But if, and again, with a more flexible process, instead of seeing three females invited to the physical agility, we might have 10. There's a lot greater chance of 10 passing that physical agility than 3.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of the quantity that we're able to bring forth.
Okay. And that brings me to my next point, that, again, my thought process was that there's something we need to look at in the physical abilities test, or the PAT. And in looking at the National Report Card report, I thought they did an excellent job on explaining the problems in various areas, which included recruiting, testing for physical abilities, uniforms and equipment, firehouse living, sexual harassment, and promotions. When they talked about the testing for physical abilities, they brought up 2 points which, again, weren't addressed in the report, but perhaps we could get somebody from the fire department to talk about. And they looked at it from the standpoint of what are the problems, or what are the situations faced by women in these testing for physical abilities, and they brought out 2 points. One is training, and they indicated that, and they did a survey nationwide, and they indicated that the departments that had the greatest number of females passing those tests had extensive training before the tests were administered. I know that Mr. Scoggins, or Chief Scoggins, last time talked about that testing process, and I don't remember whether or not Glendale does that, whether we have what I would call an extensive training where the people know what they're going to be facing before they take the test. But that seemed to be an area that was a plus for getting more women being able to pass that test. And the second thing they talked about was, is the test valid?
Now that you asked that first question, if you can hold the second thought, because maybe Kevin could actually answer the first question, and then we can move to the second one.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. Harold Scoggins, Fire Department, Fire Chief. On the first question, the Glendale Fire Department does not offer a formalized training program for recruits trying to get hired as a Glendale firefighter. Now, we do have our Explorer Post and our cadet program, where if an individual is a part of one of those programs, they can train and become better prepared to become a firefighter. But many of the community colleges here in the local area do offer formalized training programs that you would basically go and register for a college class, and there is time set aside for this class to train you to become a firefighter. Now, how do you measure that? The individuals can go around to the different community colleges and take the different physical abilities tests to measure where they are in their preparation.
That's the $20 or $15.
It's actually between $2 and $5 to take the test, but for registering for the class, it's a accredited class, and you sign up for it, and you pay whatever the fee is for 1 or 2 credits, and you go every week, and they do specific training to prepare you to become a firefighter and prepare you for these type of physical tests.
Does Glendale College offer that?
Glendale College does not. Mount SAC does. Santa Ana College offers it. I think El Camino also may offer that type of class.
Maybe we should talk to Glendale College in offering it, and we'll get more recruits.
Okay, the second question on that.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that subject? I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, please, go ahead.
Because I read that article, too, and that came out at me, the idea of preparation. When do we, and apparently they have like 8 weeks into the academy or whatever, and then they do the testing. When do we do our testing?
We do our physical abilities exam before the fire chief's orals. So basically, that's a part of our process. So after you take your oral interview and you're ranked on the list, and if you pass the physical abilities test, you then go into backgrounds, and after that, you'll be given an oral by the fire chief.
Whereas in this article, I guess I'm understanding, they do the orals and the written, and they get on this list, then they're put into the academy, and then into the academy is when the physical test is done.
Well, the formal physical, I'm not sure about the article, but
I'm sorry.
Here, the formal physical training actually starts, day one of the academy. And the academy is meant to really build you up. So you come in at a certain level, and we actually build you up through the course of the recruit training academy. And so what happens, you go in day one, it's not you put on all your gear and you're going and throwing ladders and doing all that. No, there's a slow process. We hire trainers that teach you specific exercises for your weight and your weight training and endurance, that throughout the course of the process, more things are added on the drill ground. So you're physically training for the job in the academy, and then on the drill ground, you're doing the exercises that the training is building up those core muscle groups.
Is this then before the orals and getting on the...
No, this is actually in the academy itself.
That done before or after the orals?
That's done after you're hired. You're given a job offer as a recruit trainee.
So, ostensibly, before the academy, you have to pass that physical training exam in order to get into the academy.
Yes, you have to pass the physical abilities test to get into the academy. But there are a number of programs locally that can help you prepare. As a matter of fact, when we did our last seminar, as we did the seminar before, we had trainers at the seminar who gave instruction on how to prepare, and it wasn't for the person who had a gym membership. They gave a training plan out. All you had to do was just go do it. Not only did we talk about it, we gave out handouts. We actually posted it on our website also for people who were not at the seminar and who may be interested in preparing themselves to become a firefighter.
Could that, I'm reading this article, one of the things that this is the report card on women in firefighting, and interestingly enough,
Divine hasn't finished.
I know, I'll wait.
Well, if it's on the same subject...
It is, but that's okay.
Well, I'm going to be asking another question, so why don't you finish up with that train of thought?
It was interestingly, and there was talk in this article of some fire departments, specifically Kansas City, Missouri, that do their testing 8 weeks into the academy. What would be, and that theoretically allows them to have more time building up, going through all of this, and therefore not possibly putting the cart before the horse. Well, is that not something that's doable?
I don't think that would make sense for our process, and here's why. Our academy is typically 11 to 14 weeks long, and if we did not start physically testing and training until 8 weeks into the academy, we've lost a lot of ground. And in that 11 to 14 weeks, depending on the number of firefighter recruits that we have in the academy, there is a specific plan that's set out each day to make sure that they are training and testing and growing and developing in many areas. For departments to not test until 8 weeks into it, I'm not sure how long that academy may go. I've heard there's some academies that go 24 weeks. Some may even go longer than that. So if you had an academy that went 24 weeks, you have 8 weeks to prepare them and test them and train them. But we're actually closing out our academy currently right now, and they're about 8 to 10 weeks into it right now, and we're preparing for a graduation August the 1st.
Chief, has there been any discussion between the fire department and the Glendale College in reference to having something in this area? Have you explored that idea?
I have not been a part of that discussion, but Glendale College does offer a college-level fire academy, which does teach you the basics of what it takes to get you prepared physically to become a firefighter, as well as from the educational perspective of learning all the different things about the fire service, the history, and fire science and technology. So it's a well-rounded program, and if a person went into that academy and they were not prepared physically day one, they would grow throughout the course of that academy. So in a sense, they do have a program, but they don't have a program such as Mount SAC where you can register for a class and you're just going to be doing physical preparation to get you prepared physically for that.
But one of the suggestions I would have would be to talk to Glendale College and see if you guys could come up with something that this area would be a hub. Instead of Montsac, this area would be a hub to attract all these people doing the physical agility test, and then we'll get them in Glendale. So that's a suggestion that I would have. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay. The next question I had along that line, and again, this is from that same report card, they were talking in terms of a lot of the tests, and I don't know whether the CPAT is a standard test nationwide or not, but they were talking about some of the testing being, lack of a better word, outdated. In other words, not job-related, but they do it because we've always done it that way. And so I was wondering if you had any comments, Chief Scoggins, on whether or not anybody, say in Glendale, has looked at the requirements and the training and whatnot for the CPAT and determined that, well, maybe we don't need to do this anymore because technology has changed. Mm-hmm. And, whether you need to tailor it more to what in the field, on the job requirements are rather than a testing program.
The CPAT test was developed through a relationship through the International Association of Firefighters and the International Association of Fire Chiefs, and the thought process came up probably about 10 years ago, and there were people from major fire departments throughout the United States that actually came together to put this program together. It actually is a certified test that's used by some of the larger departments, and maybe some of the smaller departments are accepting their certification. So it's a certified test. The BIDL test, physical abilities test, is the one that we use. It's actually also a certified test that fire departments use. So you actually have the choice of using either. There's a difference. The CPAT test costs $150 to take, whether you pass it or fail it. So it can become maybe a bit of a financial hardship on an individual to have to pay that each time to keep taking that test, as opposed to the BIDL exam, which is a continuous type of exam, which some may view as a bit more rigorous or strenuous on an individual than the CPAT. And a lot of it has to do with maybe the environment that it's given in. And I'll give you for example, the CPAT test. It's given, one of the testing locations is inside of a warehouse where the floors are nice and smooth, so when you're dragging hose, there's no friction. You're walking in between events. A lot of things are controlled with mechanical devices and different things like that, so they're very specific actions. The BIDL exam is given generally outdoors, where you would probably be working and you're using actual fire department equipment or simulated thereof. Like if you have to pick up a ladder at the BIDL test, you're picking up a ladder. Things like that. If you have to punch something, you're using the tool you use to punch it. The BIDL is a more controlled environment. They both are good tests, and it's a measurement of where you are to get you to that entry level position, so we can start to build you up. So most of the time, if an individual is not prepared to pass either one of those exams, it may be a bit of a challenge to enter that fire academy, even day one, where we have trainers hired to train you and give you special diets and all those things necessary to keep you going throughout the course of the fire academy. It's a challenging environment.
Okay, and I appreciate the answer. I probably didn't ask the question properly, because what I was looking for is the content of the test itself, whether it's the BIDL or the CPAT. Has anybody looked at those in the last 2 years or 3 years to see if the requirements and content of those tests still represent what the fireman is doing today in the field? And perhaps there's things in there that are, not needed or require extra strength that really is never used in the field. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at, has anybody validated these tests to see if they still are valid for today's firefighting environment? Are there things that could be changed or removed that would not require as much strength to do something? Or
Mr. Devine, but from my understanding is these are standardized tests where we can actually go in there and say, and Monsac, change module 3.
Well, they are validated tests.
Let me just supplement what I think. You're correct, Commissioner Epkarian, but I think what Mr. Devine had really, in that article, apparently the study, the national report card, it was found that the passage rate for the women was much more on the CPAT than any other test. It didn't specifically say the BIDL, but that in fact possibly the CPAT test might be, as you indicated, okay, it's on a slick floor maybe rather than an outdoor floor. I think maybe what Mr. Devine is saying is, are we looking to see that maybe that type of a test, which has now on this report card, which came out just this last April, maybe we ought to be looking to that, to some other type of standardized test that might afford us an ability to generate that. That one I think would be more appropriate. Mr. Devine, does that make sense?
Yeah, that's right. I'll just read from here. It says, departments should seek alternatives to any test, including the CPAT, which has substantial adverse impact on women without validation that the test predicts on-the-job performance. So that's what I was trying to ask, and I thank Commissioner Gaddis for bringing that up.
Yeah, Commissioner Devine, I am not sure if either one of those tests have been validated in the past couple of years. They were validated at a point in time, and that's why many fire departments went away from giving their own physical abilities tests. As many fire departments as you have out there, they all had their own interpretation of what they thought the physical abilities test should be. And I can give you a for example with me. When I went and took Los Angeles City Fire Department's test, you had a series of events that you did one and you rested. You did one and you rested. You did another one and you rested. I took Pomona Fire Department's test. You did a series of 9 or 10 events, and then at the end of that, you had to run a mile for time. So they all had different things that was going on, and that opened up the door to different lawsuits and things like that. And that's what led to the creation of the billable exam and more recently the CPAT exam. They're both validated tests. I don't know the last time they were officially validated. Maybe in the research that was discovered, but I don't know that answer.
Are they validated, is that by state or county or federal government? Who validates them?
Well, I think they're validated. They've been tested. The cases, the tests have been validated through the course of a number of different applicants going through them and testing the exercises that you do for the relevance to the position. I think Joanne might have participated in the BIDL, is that correct? And that was about 10 years ago, but they've been tested in court in cases in the relevance for the position. So that's kind of the standard that's out there in the fire department.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Devine, there's no one agency that, quote, validates exams. Validation occurs as a result largely of lawsuits, as far as I understand. And again, many departments, in fact, Glendale, did their own. And that was somewhat of a dangerous practice because if you throw a test together, it might, in fact, not be valid. And I think most departments were putting together exams that were not appropriate, perhaps too hard for the actual work of firefighting. And so the validation process, entails a lot of, scientific measurement of range of motion and lifting and stuff like that. And it specifically focuses on, the relationship between that exam and the actual job duties. And you raise a really good point about, I think in general what you're asking is all of this emphasis on physical abilities, physical strength, still relevant? I mean, which is a great question. And I mean, I don't, purport to have the answer to that, but my assumption would be it is, although the strength components of the job are not happening nearly as often as, say, they used to, because, again, the fire business has changed a lot. But we still have, I think we've talked earlier about the change from firefighting to paramedic work and emergency medical service work, which still involves a significant amount of strength. In the old days, you maybe had to do a lot of climbing and lifting and stuff like that. But if you're dealing with a patient, a person who has a full cardiac arrest, and you've got to transport that person into out of an apartment building, up 3 stories, and there's no elevator, something like that. That requires a significant amount of physical strength. So there's still definitely a need for those requirements. Again, I don't purport to be an expert, but whether it's frequent or infrequent basis, these components, these physical components, are still largely valid.
Well, I don't want to belabor that, but my whole point in bringing this up is that obviously in Glendale, and I'm sure other departments, the physical part is right now the greatest impediment that I see in bringing the women into the fire department. And from a layperson standpoint, the points brought out in this report card that we just discussed are things that perhaps we or the department could look into and see whether, we're talking about, changing the rule of 3 or going to aluminum ladders or laterals and all that, which are all good ideas, but to me, these are additional ideas that you need to look at the actual source of the impediment, which is the testing. So, again, without belaboring it, I just wanted to bring it up, and I appreciate your comments on it. And where it goes from here will be up to whether the commission decides or the department decides they want to do. I do have one. You want to let somebody else talk? Because I do have another couple of points.
How many points do you have, Mr. White?
Well, actually, just
maybe we'll make an appointment with the Chief Scogans and ask Coughlin.
I just have one more, again, looking at the big picture of what was presented to us here, and I'll cut it real short. Again, we talked about the physical. The other area that is discussed quite a bit in this national report card, and we discussed to some point, some extent in our last meeting, was what I'm going to call the culture issue. And when we had our discussion last time, and we asked for the report from staff, there was some disparity in thinking amongst the commissioners whether we wanted to have the staff include a survey or an interview regarding the existence or possible existence of cultural issues. I mean, things like discrimination, harassment, exclusion, etc., existing in the department. And it was finally the consensus of the commission that we would get this factual report first, and then, based on what we hear from that, decide whether or not we want to have a survey done by the department and perhaps ultimately an investigation done by the commission as to whether or not any of these detrimental things exist in the culture of the department. So again, your report didn't address that, but I wanted to ask at this point, or throw it out for the commission to think about whether or not we should get into those areas and include that so we have the really big picture. Because again, we can have great testing, we can have tremendous recruiting, we can go to aluminum ladders, and if by chance there's a culture there that creates a problem in the workplace for women, we won't have accomplished anything.
Mr. Ryan, and we'll consider that at the end after we get all the comments. Anyone else have any comments?
I just have a question for the chief. You indicated that for at least the last 10 years, correct me if I'm wrong, the city of Glendale has used the BIDL.
Approximately.
And tonight you've also indicated that the CPAC exam is also certified or validated.
Yes.
What is there anything preventing the Glendale Fire Department from offering both tests? The CPAC might cost you $150, but if there's a question in your mind or the candidate's mind, I got the impression that, in your opinion, the CPAC, although it's been validated, is easier. Is there anything preventing the city and the Glendale Fire Department from offering both tests?
No, there's nothing preventing the city of Glendale or the Glendale Fire Department or requiring the passing of either test. No, there's nothing to do.
Would you consider that?
Yes,
as a practice?
I would consider it as a practice, but I would probably look to change the structure of how we do it. Currently, the way we do it right now is we may invite 50 candidates down to take the test on one day, and since the city of Glendale pretty much takes over the entire testing site, we pay for the candidates at $2 to $5 that costs. To do that same practice for 50 candidates at $150 a piece would be a bit of a challenge. So I would restructure how we do it and put it on the candidate to bring the certificate in as qualification to move on at a certain point in the exam process.
Can I just sorry, go ahead. Just to follow up, we talk about and want to hear about accepting, basically previous tests, right. But you don't now accept the CPAT. It's only a previous passage of the BIDL. Is that correct?
We do not accept the CPAT right now because the way our process is set up, we host the event on one day. We bring all the candidates to one spot one day, and actually our last several tests I go witness. It's kind of important to have someone down there. If you change the process, you put it on them to bring the cert in. You just change it up a little bit and require them to bring the cert in at a certain point, similar to the way we do with EMT. They have to bring their EMT certificate in before the oral interview. This could be another thing they have to bring in before they can actually go to the oral interview. Is a valid physical abilities testing certificate that they pass, and their EMT certificate, and that's a for example for you.
Sorry, Commissioner Coleman. I do have some comments.
Okay. You do have comments?
Oh, yeah.
Mr.
I can't let Mr. Devine out. Do me? I mean, that's how I make my living. Let's talk about that. So currently, we don't allow, one of the recommendations of the alternatives is to allow certificates within 2 or 3 months prior to the Glendale Fire Department exam. I take it we don't do that now. Everybody has to pass the test as we administered, and it's the Biddle test.
Yes.
Okay, so and I'm actually we currently, and then if they did come in with that, then they would not have to take the physical under the suggestion. That's not what we do now. That
Right.
they would not have to take that physical exam.
Right. We would just make it a requirement.
Okay. And that's something that would be there on them, so that $150 out of your budget is a non-issue then.
It's a non-issue, and a number of candidates take both tests on a regular basis because departments may require that certificate of either or. So a lot of the candidates go and take both tests just so they always have a copy. So a lot of the candidates who are really pushing, they have both certificates.
Both the CPAT and the Biddle.
Right.
Okay. But currently, we don't even accept a previously taken Biddle. It has to be our Biddle.
That's right.
So if they have a bad day, have a headache, whatever, that's too bad.
That's right.
Okay. So you are. Do you think that the lessening by allowing that, would it somehow lessen the recruits, if you will, or the physical ability of our firefighters to meet the standards that you would expect?
No, as long as we put a reasonable time frame on it. I think the certificate is good for 1 year for most of these tests, but that can be a bit long, and a lot of things can happen to a person's physical abilities if they aren't staying on top of things. A reasonable time frame would be, 2 to 3 months, like was mentioned, and that way, if a candidate was not successful the first time, they can go back next weekend or next weekend or next weekend until they get it, and that's okay.
Now, let me follow this up. Since our last meeting, I've met with you.
Yes.
I've read the article that was in the LA Weekly. I've now read this national study, and I've had an opportunity to speak with a captain in the Los Angeles Fire Department who works out at the same facility I work out. I think I indicated that to you. And I've also indicated to you, let me just tell you something. I watch her work out, and it's like I do nothing. She is just consistently working out, and she is in fabulous shape. And my question is are they required to take these tests after they initially pass it? Do you continually require them to take these tests?
No, not the timed physical abilities tests. Throughout the academy on a weekly basis, you're tested on a series of events that happen in a continuous nature. Once you're out of the academy and you're on probation, there's a variety of tests that you have to take, but the entry-level exam, no. Once you're out of the academy, you don't have to take those type of tests anymore.
Ever again. So
Ever again.
Theoretically, you don't have to stay in shape.
Well, theoretically, you do not have to stay in shape. We have a wellness program that we encourage all of our firefighters to participate in, and all of us do, because it's important that we are in shape, because when it's time to go to work, there's no room for error there. As you become more accustomed to your job duties, you become smarter in how you do them. So maybe over the course of 10 or 15 years, you do not need to be in the same shape that you were when you first got hired, because you've learned the proper techniques and you have some experience in the position. So you don't have to be in the same shape as a 20-something when you're 30-something and still be able to do the same job.
Let me just say that this captain is in better shape than a lot of 20-something-year-olds, and I know she's not that. Obviously, she's a captain. Let's talk about one of the suggestions of the recruitments of laterals that Captain Davis had commented on happened in the 90s. One of the suggestions here is that in doing so, we would waive the written portion if in fact they've had a certain amount of experience. We don't do that now. Is that correct?
We don't do that now for the open firefighter tests. We have recruited lateral paramedics in the past, had a lateral opening where they didn't have a formalized written exam. They had to do some paramedic skills and had a oral interview. So we have had lateral tests, paramedic firefighter tests for the department, but not specifically for lateral firefighters. But what you get there is you don't just get, we're talking about females and minorities tonight. You don't just get that group. You get a lot of other candidates too. So, I mean, if we do a lateral exam, it's not to say that, we're going to be successful in meeting the target. We get out there, we get out in front and we talk to people, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. We've tried these things, so.
Let me just ask, Matt, maybe this is a question for you. We currently, and you mentioned the police department, if we hire in laterals from the police department, is the written test waived?
Russ Kwan is shaking his head, saying yes.
So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, Chief, about that. I mean, laterals are not, it could be male, female, black, white, everybody's welcome. Mm-hmm. But clearly, if, we obviously have some documented incidents that Captain Davis has indicated, and obviously that was a while back, but, I mean, clearly it opens up another avenue. Mm-hmm. They've already have passed, I would take it, the BIDL or the CPAT or some sort of a physical exam. So would that, I don't think that would be a necessity for that. I mean, it seems to me it may not happen, but at least it's another street. There's no guarantee anything's going to happen.
Right, that's correct.
Is that not, did you feel that's not an appropriate thing to do, or have you given some thought, or what?
Well, haven't given much thought to before the report and different things like that, haven't given much thought to the open firefighter recruitment. We had a specific need for paramedics, and we actually thought that was an avenue there that we would actually get some of the same, targets like we're talking about right now. It wasn't successful with the paramedic firefighter list, but, that's something that we can sit down with HR and work through.
It seems to make a lot of sense to me. It's obviously another street and made no guarantees, but it certainly allows us, with a minimal amount of risk, a maximum amount of possible return. One final area was
one question before you go on. Matt, the paramedics that were hired on lateral without a written, was that a modification of the bulletin? And they came in front of us.
Yes, we did.
I'm certain that we did. That was a long time ago.
Yeah,
well, actually, we've done two. We've done one about 8 to 10 years ago, and we've done one recently that we have 3 firefighter paramedics who are going to be coming off probation real soon here.
And the reason, of course, that went to you was because we did have to modify those minimum requirements to require the paramedic license.
Okay.
My final area of comment is the single-function paramedics that have been recommended. Has that something that you've been discussing? Something you'd be receptive to?
Well, we're looking at a modification to our EMS program, and it does not include the single-function paramedic. It does include a non-sworn EMT, and I can kind of parallel that path to maybe a cadet, for example. If we had some candidates who had potentials as cadets they could maybe serve in that role as an EMT and receive a lot of the training and exposure and learn a lot of the things they need to do in a position such as that. It doesn't necessarily have to be a single-function paramedic. It can be an EMT. You can pick the title. It can be a cadet. But having an option and an avenue to bring in people who are talented, who have the potential to grow and learn, that's going to be the important thing for us.
Mr. Chair, if I could clarify, and correct me if I'm wrong, the term single-function paramedic, is that traditionally a sworn position?
No, that's
okay, that's just a full-time person who does paramedic work.
Right, and what
and will not run on emergency fire calls or anything like that.
They may run on those calls, but their role would be to be a paramedic, not to be a firefighter.
Which is not how we do it. We have firefighters slash paramedics, and the paramedics are in fact firefighters. They meet all the requirements as a firefighter, yet they receive an assignment pay for having a paramedic license.
But Pasadena has done. That's how they developed the high rate of females they had.
What Pasadena Fire Department did was they transitioned all of their paramedics, single-function paramedics, period, to firefighter paramedics. They don't have that position any longer. They went away from that. That's the same thing that LA City Fire Department did. They had single-function paramedics, and they transitioned them into the fire department as sworn firefighters.
I see. Okay, I have nothing further.
Okay, I have, Mr. Duane, did you have something? I have a couple of comments, and I know that there is an actual card for someone to speak, but now that we've made all of our comments, let me make my comments, and then we'll take the person who's going to speak, and Chris Stavros, I'm sorry. First of all, unfortunately, I wasn't here during the conversations previously because I had to attend another meeting, so I left the meeting early that one day. But I appreciate the commissioners that were here that actually brought this to the front. I think it's extremely important. However, the realities are the realities. I mean, we are looking at recruiting from a very small pool of candidates that are available. Comparing apples with apples, you're looking at Area C jurisdiction, which is our jurisdiction here, I'm assuming, right, Matt?
Right.
Somewhere close to us, within a radius of 20 miles, 15 miles. And our numbers are not only compatible, but very comparable, but in the African-American community, it actually exceeds what some other people have, minus, I think, Pasadena, probably. So I see this as not only an issue for Glendale, but an issue that's facing almost every every fire department in the area, if not in LA County, probably statewide. There's just a few very limited counties or even cities that have actually combated that, and they actually do have firefighters. What is the reasons that, let's say, Pasadena has more? I'm not really sure. Maybe we need to explore that, and recommendations by Mr. Devine and everyone else is important. But again, just so we go back again, at some point I was screaming and yelling, and I'll continue to scream and yell at the Armenian firefighters in the fire department. But then when you go in there and you actually talk to people and say, how many do you have? What do you do? When your pool is 8 people, to get almost 6 of those to actually pass everything is going to be difficult. And I see the same issue here. When you go to the female firefighters, I see that there are just a limited amount of people that everyone wants, and the package you put together is probably going to attract more people. Maybe what we need to do is provide a better package. It seems like we have a great package. I looked at the newspaper, Chief, and it says that your firefighters are getting paid a lot of money.
Firefighters work very hard. As a matter of fact, the number of them are out of the city
I'm not sure if it's overtime or what, but it seems like you guys are doing well, so I don't know if there's any incentive package necessary. But again, looking at what we have here, we have a pool of people where you can draw from, and that pool is very limited, and you can only take so much from what's available in the community and in the state and the county. So that's the issue that I see here. But any recommendations or anything that we can do to promote more hiring of ethnicities and more hiring of females, I'm all for it. Be going to CPAT and having the candidate pay for it if they really are interested. And if that does not bring down the quality of the firefighters, again, going back to that again, I don't want us to jeopardize my family when there's a fire because we're trying to hire more minorities or more females or more males, for that matter, that are not qualified to do the job. If we don't lower the standards and we can still look at alternatives to do what we're doing, then I'm all for it. But if that means lowering the standards to bringing someone who's less qualified that would jeopardize my family's life if a fire breaks out, then I'm definitely 100% against lowering the standards to meet just the quotas. And that's all I have on that. And now we have two cards.
If I may make
Yes,
a couple
please.
comments before I step down. First of all, I'd like to thank Matt Doyle and the HR team for the work they did on the report. They did an outstanding job really looking at the issue and finding the information. And just to let you know, every member of the Glendale Fire Department is committed to finding the best firefighters out there for the community and this organization to make sure that it's going to remain one of the best fire departments in Southern California and throughout the nation. And to just take a second to address the issue of is there an investigation or anything like that needed in the fire service. My answer as a fire chief and leader of the organization would be no. Any behaviors that are out of balance with what the expectations are of the city and the community will not be tolerated in the fire department. The culture, it's a great environment. I really want to encourage you, each and every one of you, to come and spend some time with the firefighters, not at the main station, but go to the outlying stations. Just show up in the afternoon and ask some of the questions, and I think you'll really be pleased with the quality and the character and the integrity of the firefighters here in this community. And to give you a better understanding of what really takes place to prepare a firefighter to serve this community, I want to extend the offer to you again. I know it was extended to you once I'll come pick you up, take you over to the fire academy. I'll come and pick you up and load you all up because they graduate August 1st. But there's some opportunities to give you a better understanding. So there's a few ways we can address it. We can go over to the academy and see what they have to do to prepare to get in. You can go inside the fire station and just talk and meet with the firefighters, and I think your questions will be answered because the firefighters that we hire and select here are, their integrity is better than most people around. The quality and the character of these individuals is just top notch. I mean, they will put their lives on the lines for you or your families, as many of our firefighters are doing right now in Northern California, and some of them have been out there for over 2 weeks, and we've been changing them out along the way and planning to send some more up to help being away from their family and friends. So, firefighters earn a good living. Firefighters work hard. We have a quality package here, but we feel we deserve it because our personnel, they do work hard, and they're committed. They're committed to the community. They're committed to the surrounding communities, and this last month, they've been committed to the state. So, thank you for looking at this openly and objectively. It really means a lot to the organization for you taking the time to explore this issue. And we're going to keep pushing harder to diversify the department, keep looking for qualified and talented people, because that's what this community deserves, talented firefighters to lead it into the future. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have two cards here. Chris Stavros. Great name, last name.
Good evening, Chris Stavros, Captain with the City of Glendale Fire Department, President, Glendale Fires Association. I wanted to just address a couple things that I thought might have been unclear when I was watching on TV. The first is the Biddle exam, when you go and take that course at Mount Sac or Santa Ana College. This is what it is you go the first day of the class, and you actually take the test, and they see where you're deficient and how you're doing at it. Then they design a strength... Oh, sorry. They design a strength and training program for you to see where you're deficient at. Then you actually take the test.
Timer. What?
Put the timer on, Sandra. Come on. Pressure. Matt doesn't give you this kind of pressure, Sandra?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Leave her alone.
Then you go and take the actual exam every week. So you know exactly where, and they keep a chart, okay? You didn't pass it the first 5 weeks, you didn't pass it the first 10 weeks, the last 10 weeks of the semester you passed it, you know exactly where you're at. You come up for the Glendale Fire Department that day, you know exactly what you're going to be doing. It's just like if you had a requirement that somebody had to type 50 words a minute, okay? And let's say it was going to be on a different typewriter than they're used to using. They went and took a class to learn, sit in that exact chair with that exact typewriter, and go and learn how to type 50 words a minute. They get up to 75, 80 words a minute. They go the day of the exam. They type maybe 90. They exceed it, then they're on the list. That's what that course is like. It's the exact test and the exact layout. They already know everything. There are no surprises. The second thing I wanted to address was regarding the CPAT. The CPAT is generally considered to be a slightly easier exam. I'm intimately familiar with it. My best friend, my college roommate, designed the CPAT. He's a captain for LA County Fire Department. And what I will tell you, which is I think the question Commissioner Devine was asking is, yes, it's a validated test, but is it representative of what a firefighter does? And I'm going to tell you categorically, no. If you allow people to take the CPAT and get into our academy, by and large, they are going to fail our academy. That's going to cost the city a lot of money, humiliation, maybe even an injury. The CPAT exam is not representative of what a firefighter has to do. Okay? It was very political the way that test came about. Do you want to do that? I'm fine with it. But I ask yourself, would you do that for whatever business or whatever employee you're in when you're going to hire somebody? Would you hire somebody who you think is going to have a poor chance of success, especially when you're probably spending $50,000 to hire that person?
Yeah, but let me just...
Sure.
You're I'm sorry, your title was?
Captain.
Captain, we don't do anything. We ask the questions.
Okay.
And we ask the question from the chief, do you have any issues of anyone taking this test or the other? And he says he didn't have an objection. We don't actually set anything. I don't think any of us up here is qualified to say that a firefighter should take a test or a B test. And I don't think that we ever did that. I think that Commissioner Devine, I think, asked, would you have any issues, and the chief said that he has no issues of anyone taking either one of those two tests. So when you say that, when you say, well, if you guys decide to do it, my echo would be that we didn't decide to do it. You did.
Mr. Chair, as the commissioner, you do have some authority over the selection process for this and any other exam. So
No.
When we bring a bulletin before you, it might say that the minimum requirement is to obtain a certificate, either the BIDL or CPAT. So you do have authority in that direction.
But Ms. Doyle, I'm saying that our job is to ask the questions. I'm hoping that the chief will be honest with us to say, no, BIDL test is much, much better. The other one is easier. I think that you get an inferior, just like what Captain said, that you get an inferior firefighter if they pass the CPAT test. Is that correct?
I'm not going to say
That's your opinion.
For every single person, but I'm going to say by and large, yes. I say that the candidate is not set up for success with that exam. That's my opinion. Again, I think I can speak a little more freely than the chief can up here, and I'm going to do that.
And as the president of your association, you're basically telling the understanding of your association is that the CPAT is not as good of a test as the BIDL.
That's correct. And there's a couple other things I want to tell you.
Because, you don't represent yourself, you represent the association.
That's correct. That the BIDL exam is not an overly strenuous exam. This is not like... the BIDL test...
We've got one female in the fire department here in the city of Glendale, and that is because of the physical requirements of the BIDL.
That's not true.
So it's not true?
No.
Explain to me.
There was a female firefighter in my academy class, Jan Chatelain. She's a captain with LA County Fire Department now. I'd take 10 Jan Chatelaines. I'd take 10 Joanne Davises. I was just out with Joanne Davis for 15 days in Big Sur on a fire. Give me 10 of them. Okay? That is, the facts are, from what I saw in Matt Doyle's presentation, was that most departments, whether they're using the CPAT or the BIDL, are having a hard time recruiting and retaining women. And that's exactly what I told you last time, because the pool of candidates is remarkably small, and the competition for them is incredibly great, and they have greater opportunity with a bigger fire department. I'm assuming that I can go on.
I apologize for interrupting.
No, that's no problem. I mean, I'm here to offer my opinion, but also I want what's best here. These tests are designed to help a person succeed. If you were ever to sit on an oral board, okay, when a candidate comes in for the oral, you're just saying, dazzle me, and you're trying to help that candidate bring out the best in them. Both physical agilities are designed, when they're taking that exam, there's people going along with them, encouraging them. Keep it up, you're doing fine. These tests are designed to help people to succeed. The BIDL exam is 10 times easier than the physical agility that I took for Long Beach Fire Department, Riverside Fire Department, or the Glendale Fire Department when I took it 11 years ago. It's not, I'm going to tell you right now, it is not overly strenuous. It is a very well-paced exam that people for $2 to $5 can go and take it as many times as they want prior to getting hired. And the question I asked to you and to the citizens, would you hire somebody for a position in whatever job or occupation you're in if you thought they had a small probability of successfully even passing the initial training exam? Let's say you're a law firm. Are you going to hire a person who you don't think is going to pass the bar and pay him for a year before he has the opportunity to pass it? The answer, in my opinion, would be absolutely not.
But you don't know the answer to that question. You could hire a Harvard grad that isn't going to pass the bar.
That's
true.
So
you're assuming facts, not in evidence.
And what I'm saying is that if you hire somebody off the CPAT exam, their chances, in my opinion, of passing the fire academy.
In the opinion of your association, because you keep saying my opinion, but you represent the association, right?
That's correct. Is that they have a poorer probability of passing the academy. Now, if the city decides that they want to take that risk, I have no issue with it, because maybe you get a gem. Maybe you get the diamond in the rough. No problem with it. I have no problem with that. But it is expensive. It is very expensive.
You know what you just did? You basically have put in a legal kind of a question mark in front of us, because now if we go to a CPAT and if somebody fails, the city will have liability because of what the statement that you just made. I just want you to understand that.
I don't know what I said.
Well, you just said that you actually hire an inferior person and actually not as good of a person and put them in the academy and they go through the academy as a result of getting someone in CPAT or getting somebody in BIDL, correct?
I don't think inferior is the right word. I think a less probability of being successful in the fire academy. I think that's the point I'm trying to make.
Mr. Chair, I think we've kind of lost vision of what we're trying to do here tonight. This
is a public comment anyways. We
I know, but this exercise started a few months ago with trying to figure out what the fire department can do to get more women and minorities in their ranks. The statistics show that in the last 5 years, no females have been hired into the fire department. They also show that the reason they haven't been hired is because they have not passed the physical test. I don't think this commission is going to start telling the fire department which test to use or how to use it or when to use it or micromanage it. I think the message that we want to get to the fire department is that the problem seems to be around the physical testing, and leave it up to them to figure out what needs to be done to correct that, if anything. And I don't believe we are going to tell them which test to use. And I think this whole exercise has been to get information out. Matt Doyle has worked very, very hard putting out all this information, giving the fire department ideas on, where to look and what to do and how to handle it. And it's up to the fire department to run with it. And the proof will be in the pudding. In another year, if we're sitting here and there's still no women in the fire department and still none of them have passed the physical test, why, the fire department's going to need to, talk about that and say, well, what's going on?
Maybe give them a little bit more than a year.
2 years.
In the next few years, let's say.
I'm just saying that this is really for informational purposes only. It's not to direct the fire department to do anything. But I think even if we're sitting here 2 years from now and there's still no women in there, that there's some issues that need to be looked at.
Well, this is a little different than the last commission meeting I spoke at, so I think if that's the case, then I'll just wrap up my comments by saying this. The pool for Armenian and women candidates is tiny. We hired Manya's brother. Okay? Talk to him about why we don't have more Armenian.
Don't hold that against us, really.
No, I'm not gonna. I mean, now you got two great people working for the city. But, I mean, talk to him.
Two?
Manya and her brother.
Manya,
okay. Are there any other Hunanians working for the city? Not right now? But my point is, it really it crosses this issue crosses across both. You could talk to him about why his friends aren't very interested in the fire service. Now, I think as we head down the line further and they become further removed from maybe being first generation, that will probably change, and it's great. That's what we're about. And I want to stress again.
Captain,
give me 10 Joanne Davises and 10 Jan Chatelains, who I graduated the academy with. They're very hard to find. It's not that we don't want them. It's not that we don't want them. We want to hire them, and we want them to be successful.
Okay, go ahead.
Assuming that we do have authority over the testing,
Right.
if in fact a policy were implemented where the Biddle test, taken at any time within a period of time, 2 to 3 months, let's say, prior to the time the Glendale Fire Department were to administer it, is that something the association would be in favor of?
I have no issue with that. No issue with it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
It's the same
Captain.
test, so 2 or 3 months isn't a difference. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very
Appreciate your
much.
service. I know it's hard to be here that late every night and, hear these things, but we really...
It's harder being up at Big Sur now, though, isn't it?
Well, if you own a business up there, it's not very pleasant at this time of the year, but...
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for being there. Thank you, Captain
Next
Davis.
card is from Joanne Davis. Good
Good
evening.
evening, Commissioners, Chair Carrion, Joanne Davis, Glendale Fire Captain. Happy to be here again. I just wanted to reiterate, first of all, some of the points that Chris made. And I think that the area that he's talking about is the gray area that exists between the difficulty level of the Biddle and the difficulty level of the CPAT. And then if we take it another step and say the academy process is going to be more difficult still than either of those basic entrance exams. It's a day after day, long-term, grueling process. It's not a one-time, I have the weekend to recover from it. It's ongoing, the academy process. So even somebody who passes the Biddle, as we've demonstrated with many of our male candidates, are not successful in getting through the academy. And so I think what happens is, if we look at the Biddle and we say, and your point's well taken, they're not passing the Biddle. But we say that the answer to that is to lower the standard and allow them to pass the CPAT, which is, by most agreement, less difficult than the Biddle. Then yes, we get more women through the process, and we can say we've hired more women. But it's still not an indicator of how successful they'll be in the academy, and I think that's the point that Chris was trying to make.
But if they don't make it through the academy, we don't hire them in the first place, right?
No, they've been hired at that point as
already.
firefighter recruits. Is that the official term?
And they don't pass probation.
Right. Several points that were made I want to touch on. Point was made that no formal training is made by the department in terms of preparation for the Biddle. We've tended to put the onus on the candidate in that regard. It's been pointed out that they can go on their own time and take the test virtually any weekend for a very small amount of money. The point there being, if they don't have the motivation or the moxie to go take the test on their own and practice it, then they're probably not the candidate that we want anyway, and again, are probably not going to be successful in the academy. I want to again reiterate, it came up again tonight, the issue of harassment and a culture of hostility in the department. I thought I had fairly clearly put the kibosh on that the last time I was here, but evidently that's still
Let
floating
me just
around.
interject. You did put it quite clearly to me.
Okay,
I got you the first time.
great. Thank you.
Eloquently as well.
Yes.
Thank you. I would reiterate
And with
that point
moxie.
again. Thank you. And the other thing that Stab mentioned is that the pool of women is very, very small. And I have my own opinions about why that is. If we, and Commissioner Devine, you questioned me on this previously, and because the issue was not agendized at that time, we weren't able to delve into it any further. If you look, just if we say, for example, that the pool of candidates that we are looking at, the city of Glendale, is all women in Southern California, just as an example. The number of women who even want the job is incredibly small. I'm going to guess, and I have no statistics on this point, I'm going to guess 5%. Conservative estimate. The social mores, just getting your fingernails dirty. Captain Stavros said we spent 15 days in Big Sur. I think I had 3, maybe 4 showers in that time. Women typically don't want to be in that environment. So the number of candidates who even want the position is going to be very small. Then you cross-reference that with the number of women who can do the job. And there may be some who could do the job that don't want it. So what you're looking for is the subset between those two categories, which narrows down the number even further. Then you enter the issue of timing, which was brought up in the report. I've been to numerous recruitment fairs where people have come to me and asked me for information about becoming a firefighter. And I have to say, the first question they ask is, are you testing now? And in many cases I've had to say, well, we just hired a class. We'll probably hire in another 10 months or so, and their eyes glaze over and they walk away. So we lose potential candidates just by virtue of the timing. Do you mind? Thank you.
Going to go away. Sorry.
Finally, we add into that geography. Someone who lives in Orange County is going to prefer to work nearer their home. So really, if we're talking about candidates in all over Southern California, it's probably a much smaller pool even than that. And I can tell you from my own experience, I worked for the State Department of Forestry and Fire Protection before I came to Glendale. And when I decided that I wanted to pursue firefighting as a full-time career, I wrote to every fire department in Southern California and said, please put me on your interest list. And at that time, I was testing all over Southern California, and at that time would have been willing to move anywhere. But if 2 tests had come up about the same time, my preference would have been to stay near my home at that time. And then you get into issues such as the benefits package you were talking about. Captain Stavros has mentioned promotability and that sort of thing. So there are a number of different issues. You get down to such a small number of people that the odds that we're going to end up with them are astronomically minuscule. So all I can do is reiterate that I think the department has done an outstanding job with the resources that we have to work with. Some of these other departments, as mentioned, have huge training staffs that do nothing but go out and try and recruit in targeted groups. We simply don't have the resources to do that, nor is it necessarily appropriate. And finally, as I said before, I had offered myself up to answer any questions that you had. Again, because it was not an agendized item, I was not allowed, so if you have any questions for me now, here I am.
Fine. Thank you. First of all, what is your thought on the concept of the, what's that called, the paramedic only, single function, bringing that to the department where women could come in or anybody could come in and be a paramedic without having to go through the physical ability for a firefighter?
Well, tonight's the first time I've heard of that, actually, idea. It's probably not a bad one. Would be quite a departure for us as a department from the way we've done business till now. But it would certainly be a good way to acclimate, if you will, some women to the fire department and the paramilitary organization and what we're all about, and certainly give them access to people that could help mentor them if that was the direction that they chose to go.
Okay. The next question on the Biddle test, and it's obvious that that's the better test, and
we believe so.
Pardon me?
We believe so.
Yes. Do you believe that, I don't know how long ago you took it, I guess, 10 years ago you've been with? Anyway, do you believe that it needs to be looked at any place along the line to see if it's still valid in terms of representing the work that's actually done in the field?
Well, I've never actually taken the Biddle myself. What I participated in was the construction of the test at that time. They were running existing firefighters through a variety of events to determine what appropriate time frames would be. And the purpose at that time was to determine what the actual job requirements were, or what existing firefighters could do in order to come up with valid numbers, or realistic numbers, if you will. So I've never actually taken it.
My last question is kind of a overall big picture question. Again, we started out with this exercise on the commission to figure out what needed to be done or what could be done to bring women, or more women, any women, into the Glendale Fire Department. And so far, and again, I really appreciate your comments, and I think they're right on as far as your views on this. But I got the perception from your comments and from Captain's comments that there's really nothing that can be done. That's just the way it is. There's not enough candidates. There's all these reasons, and all I heard were, I won't say excuses, but reasons why we could not accomplish what the commission started out trying to accomplish. And so my question is, if I were to ask you what can be done to bring more women into the fire department, what would be your answer?
Well, I think that, exactly, thank you. The recommendations that were made in the report are all certainly worthy of further exploration. Specifically, targeting college athletes, which was in fact how I was recruited into the fire service back in 1987. I was participating on a track team at Fresno State, and a representative from CDF came to one of our team meetings, and of course at that time they were in the midst of affirmative action and were able to do some other things in their recruitment that we can't do now. But they came to one of our team meetings and said, we're looking for female firefighters, here's the applications. They've made it that simple. And so that's certainly a valid point. The military thing is also great. If we can get females as they're exiting their military service, they would be outstanding candidates, I would think. Paramedic function, as I said, this is the first I've heard of it, but certainly sounds like a good idea. The continuous recruitment is one that a suggestion that I made based on my experience going to recruitment fairs, because it seems almost invariably that at the times the fairs are being held is not when we're hiring. And so it's so frustrating to go and spend a whole day at a recruitment fair and get maybe 2 people who are legitimately interested. You get women that come by and then find out, well, they're asking for their son. Or as soon as they find out you're not hiring, they need a job now. So they don't want to hear that you're testing next year. They want a job now. And if that means moving somewhere else, they're willing to do that. So by having the continuous recruitment, I would think we would certainly generate more interest in that. That again raises some difficulties in a department our size. But those can potentially be addressed. The issue with the laterals, or waiving the written test for the laterals, was another idea that I presented. And again, as was mentioned earlier, it was in the early 90s. LA City was having some morale issues with a lot of their females. And so because I had participated in the female tutorial program, I knew a number of the females that were over there at that time. And so I'm calling them out going, hey, come on to Glendale. It's a great department, pays comparable, it's great equipment, everything. And I got probably 8 of them to come take our test, and none of them passed the written. And it was so frustrating that these are women who work for a department that's arguably as difficult, if not more so, than ours to get into, and they can't get into ours because of a written test. So that was 8 women right there that got away from us. So that was a frustrating thing, and that was an easy fix, in my opinion. Recruitment and advertising sources, that's certainly something that we can look into. PAT certificates would be another one that I think would be very simple, no cost to the department. If they can bring a certificate in, having taken the test in the last 2 or 3 months, perfect. That's great. And then again, as was mentioned, if somebody has a headache, they're just having a bad day, they've got a cold, whatever the issue is, you put somebody's job on the line. Before they even start the test, their heart rate's going 110. So it's a huge disadvantage to have it all on the line on that one day. That brings us back to the point that they should have maybe taken it 2 or 3 times by then. And if they were really motivated, they probably would have. So the pressure wouldn't be so much. That's a side issue. The aluminum ladders, I have mixed feelings about. There are significant safety issues, but they are significantly lighter. So I probably don't really have an opinion on that. I probably would lean towards staying with the wood. And the rule of 3, that was something I had never considered before reading this report for the first time tonight. That's clearly would allow a great deal more flexibility for the department than what we have now.
Thank you. That's all I have. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, no one could say that we didn't exhaust every avenue and every angle in this particular issue, if anyone talks about that. First of all, let me just make a quick note on this. I read the report again, and I believe that, first of all, it's an incredible report. I don't know how many hours it took to do this report, but a great job. And Matt, to you and to your staff, that, it really takes this thing seriously. And when we ask for something, you guys have always been there and has given that to us with the numbers exactly the way we wanted to. For that, I wanted to thank you. And I think I talk in behalf of everyone sitting here and the people that are not even here. And the second thing is that I really personally, and I know Commissioner Devine brought up the fact that maybe we want to consider some kind of an investigation, but it was something that was brought up previously due to the environment. I really think that this issue was brought up. I think it's brought to the forefront now. If we would have done at least half of this also for the Armenian community and included here, maybe we would have definitely a full report done, but maybe we'll come and visit that at some point in the future. But I think that we need to give this some time. We have brought it to the forefront. We have a new fire chief. We have he understands the direction. I think he understands and he appreciates, has embraced what he needs to do, and I think that's the direction he wants to take. But to call for an investigation, I personally don't think that would be the right thing to do. So with that, if someone has a motion, if we need to just take this as a action item and bring back some more recommendations, I'm not sure where we want to go with this now. Mr.
Chairman, I think we ought to accept. I would move that we thank the staff first. That staff did a marvelous job. Accept the report and ask for a follow-up on what we have, these recommendations, within a year, or in a year, not within, in a year, so that in a year from now we can take these suggestions, tell us what has been done, what we think about them, et cetera, so that we're not losing the issue. That was my motion.
Okay, hold on. Before your motion goes in, I see Chief stood up and ran to the front, so we might as well give him 2 minutes. We won't put you on a timer, but you have a very short period of time.
Very short comment, Commissioner. I'd like the Commission to be informed that due to the recent budget cuts of 6 sworn positions, that we will not be having any active recruitments in the near future. As a matter of fact, we were scheduled for an academy class in the fall of this year. That's not going to happen. And as we move forward with the restructuring of the organization, so it may be a bit of time before we actually have an active recruitment. We have 13 recruits in the academy right now that's going to fill our vacancies, but we are going to be delayed in hiring, and a year may not be an appropriate amount of time to actually yield results from this report.
Why don't we, let me just clarify. I don't expect results. I mean, I think Commissioner Abkarian, Chairman Abkarian indicated this. I'm looking at results over maybe a 3-year period of time. But what I'd like to have done myself is, we have these recommendations. They clearly have come out in a report. I would think that the command staff would look at them and come up with, yeah, maybe we can do this, maybe we can't do this. That's what I want. I want them to be considered and a follow-up report back on what alternatives are you I don't want to see, I don't expect results in a year. I would expect consideration of the alternatives, other alternatives maybe, and a follow-up report. That's what the purpose of my motion. Absolutely. Is that a fair time period, a year?
That's fair. Absolutely.
I will second that. There's a motion and a second. Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Chair Abkarian?
Yes, and Matt, that you understand what that was?
Yes.
Okay. Next item, please.
Agenda forecast.
Oh, that's done.
No, it isn't.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. It happens when we're here too long.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, you see the items that are scheduled for the upcoming next few meetings in your report. We do have a pending findings and orders for our 2 current appeal hearings, of which we may consider a special meeting when that comes in.
Talk to you. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Someone distracted me for a second.
I did.
Candace again.
I indicated we, in addition to the items listed here, we are anticipating presenting findings and orders on our two appeal hearings. With the commission's direction, I can attempt to schedule that upon receipt of those findings and orders, or upon the preparation of those, and perhaps a special meeting.
And we will leave the date open until we actually confirm with everyone, but we would probably would like to have it on Wednesday if it's convenient for everyone. But yes, we would want to have it scheduled, because if not, then it has to be continued until end of August, maybe early September even, because of people not being here. So I'd rather not do that. Mr. Devine?
Didn't you say that we didn't actually need the findings and orders to do it? So why don't we just go ahead and schedule it for next Wednesday?
People don't have the calendar. I don't know what... let's go ahead and have it scheduled for next Wednesday, regardless of if we get the actual findings in writing or not.
We don't know that we have our attorney present.
Oh, that too.
And you will need Mr. Potter, I take it?
We will need Mr. Potter.
Yeah, we do need them.
I will contact Mr. Potter tomorrow and see what his availability is.
If he is available on Wednesday, we'd like to do it on Wednesday.
Okay. If any other days of the week, would that work, in case he's not available?
I guess you can circulate it, and then we just have to give the appropriate notice to the public, which is 72 hours before our...
I thought they're closed hearings, so why do we need them?
Oh, they still have to be noticed?
They have to be noticed. They're closed hearings, but we have to still notice them under public notice, because 5 of us get together and listen to them.
Does anyone know if Mr. Manukian will be...
Yeah, he should be returning on the 13th, he said, so I'm assuming that he should be here on next Wednesday.
Okay.
Make a motion that we consider the 2 outstanding disciplinary appeals in closed session at a special meeting to be called for July 16, 2008 at 4:30 p.m. at a site to be determined and noticed in accordance with the Brown Act.
Second.
Motion and second. Could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Devine?
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yes.
Commissioner Gantis?
Yes.
Chair Abkarian?
Yes. One thing that I wanted to change here on 827, legal opinion and authority of the commission, and then there's a whole bunch. I just basically wanted to say legal opinion and authority of the commission under the charter to investigate discrimination or discriminatory environment that affects hiring or disciplinary action in the city. So, or, just discrimination and discriminatory environment, then we can go into what rules we have. So, I don't know if I want a legal opinion. I want to have what authority we have to hire an outside counsel to give us that legal opinion. With all respect to Mr. Braden, I don't have any issues with, he has already given us a legal opinion. I tend to differ with his legal opinion, and I said that the first day that he gave it, I think 3 years ago. So what my issue in here is, does the Civil Service Commission have a right to ask for an outside legal opinion? If we do, what is the process in going around doing that? Once we do that on August 27th, then we would mark a date where we would actually get that legal opinion back.
Assuming we have the authority.
Assuming that we have the authority and that we can actually do it. Mr. Doyle?
Is this an assignment for the city attorney or for the Director of Human Resources?
I think this is a request on August 27th to give us an opinion as to could the Civil Service Commission hire an outside legal counsel to give them, if the commission votes on it, hire an outside commission to give them a legal opinion, and two, if there is, what is the process in doing that? Do we just ask for it? And I guess Mr. Braden will give us that opinion.
Okay. So the item for August 27th is
I would think as part of that also ought to be the third consideration is funding the sources available to fund such a.
That would be a part of it.
Yeah.
But, do you want, just for clarification, do you want generally your authority to hire outside legal counsel to give you an opinion, or is it limited to investigation of hiring processes, that opinion being the investigation of hiring processes and discrimination in disciplinary actions?
My understanding would be that if we have the right to actually hire an outside counsel, then we can ask that outside counsel whatever legal opinion we would want from him at that point. I think the initial thing would be, could we hire an outside counsel to give us opinion about what our rights are? And if the answer is yes, then we'll ask that outside counsel what we want him to do for us.
I think what he's asking you is, you want to limit it to just an opinion, or do you want to know the overall general authority of you to hire?
Overall general authority of us hiring an outside legal counsel for everything. So just the whole thing. I don't want to limit it so we can't talk about it then, because we had a limited discussion.
Including, but not limited to, the issue of whether or not that outside counsel can render opinions. In other words, it's a general one, but with the inclusion of a specific area, part of the general, as to whether the ability of that counsel to give us an opinion, but not limiting the generality of what we're doing.
Somebody repeat that, please.
I have no idea what
I want
John
to do what
said.
you want, but I want a general. I don't.
Just a general, basically would say, legal opinion as to the authority of the Civil Service Commission to hire outside counsel for a legal opinion.
Or legal advice.
Or legal advice.
So basically a legal opinion on the authority to hire outside counsel to render a legal opinion.
We want to know if you have the right to hire an outside counsel. How you want to word it is up to you.
The process and the funding, those three elements of that. What's that?
Okay, next.
Civil Service Commission and our staff comments.
Anyone makes comments, I'm gonna choke them. Next.
Closed
Just
session.
kidding. Does anyone have any comments?
Mr. Chair, just one item, I'm sorry.
Staff has a comment, I'm sorry.
Very end of your today's agenda is an item memorializing the appointment of Cindy Cleary as the new Director of Libraries. This took effect as of June the 24th. This was done by the person of recognized attainment, appointment made by the city manager, and that process requires notification of the commission of this action, so I'm doing so.
Thank you so
Does
much.
that mean it didn't go out for public?
That is correct. She was in an acting capacity for several months, and
It was just done.
yes.
Okay, congratulations to the Director of Libraries. Any other comments? Next,
Closed session,
there is no closed session. Next,
adjournment.
We move to adjourn.
done.